In the dark of a European woodland, something is moving through the undergrowth. It does not hurry. It does not need to. Low to the ground, built like a wedge of muscle and bone, it turns the earth as it goes, and everything smaller than itself gets out of the way. We poisoned it. We hunted it. We fenced it out, shot it from helicopters, priced its head by the pound. And yet there are more of them now than when we started. This is the wild boar. The animal that took everything we threw at it and grew. Start with the weapon because the weapon never stops being made. A boar's tusks are teeth, the lower canines curving up and out from the jaw. But they are not like your teeth set once and left alone. They grow for the animal's entire life. And every time the mouth closes, the upper tusk drags against the lower, wearing it, filing it, stroking a bevel onto the edge like a blade against a stone. The animal sharpens its own knives, simply by chewing. Biologists call this whetting. The upper canines act as the whetstone, the lower as the blade, and the result is an edge kept keen without a single deliberate act. No effort. No maintenance. The design does the work. Up close, you can see the polish on the surface where bone meets bone, a bright worn stripe where the grinding happens. On an older male, the lower tusks can reach the length of a grown man's finger, and the working edge stays sharp the whole time. It is a self-maintaining weapon mounted in the face of an animal that weighs as much as you do. Nothing about it rests. The tool is finished the moment it is used and ready again the moment after. That is where the danger begins. Then there is the armor, and only the males carry it. Beneath the skin across a boar's shoulders lies a slab of dense, fibrous tissue. Hunters call it the shield. Anatomists call it the shield. It is a thickened plate of cartilage and connective tissue layered over the shoulder and flank, and in a mature male, it can grow to the width of 2 stacked hands. It has one purpose: to take a tusk and not let it through. When 2 boars fight, they do not bite for the throat. They stand shoulder to shoulder wheel and drive their tusks sideways into each other's flanks, exactly where the shield sits waiting. The plate absorbs the stroke, it blunts the goring. A blow that would open a lesser animal glances off a boar built for the same fight. Here is the strange part. The shield thickens with age and with combat. The more a male fights, the tougher his armor becomes, a callus that hardens under the very thing meant to pierce it. He is, in a sense, wearing his own history on his back. From the side, in the right light, you can see it. The shoulders sit higher and broader than the hindquarters, a hump of muscle and hide that makes the front of the animal look like it belongs to something larger. It is armor grown, not given. And unlike our own, it never needs replacing, which is more than can be said for most knights. The boar walks into every fight, already dressed for it. Now watch it move. The whole animal becomes a single forward stroke. They can cover ground at speeds close to 30 miles an hour. That is faster than any human being has ever run. From a standing start, a boar can reach you across the width of a 2-lane road before you have finished turning around. Stand in the path of one, and you hear it before you see it clearly. The crash of brush, the drum of the feet, the low grunt driven out by the effort. Then the shape resolves out of the dark, and it is already too close. The charge is not usually a hunt. A boar rarely wants to eat you. It wants you gone, or it wants to get past you, and the fastest way to do both is straight through. The tusks are held low, the head is a battering ram, and the legs do not slow at the point of contact. What makes the charge dangerous is not size alone. It is the commitment. A deer swerves. A boar does not. Once it fixes on a line, it holds that line, and it puts every pound of a body built like a barrel behind it. For an animal with poor eyesight, aiming a full-speed charge is a remarkable act of nerve. It runs at the thing it can barely see, and usually it connects. The charge delivers the blow. The tusk finishes it. A boar does not slash the way a cat rakes with a claw. It gores. The head drives forward and low, then snaps upward, a short, violent hook that lifts the tusk through whatever it meets. The power comes not from the neck alone, but from the whole front of the body. The legs plant, the shoulders load, and the head throws upward like a hammer swung in reverse. The wounds this makes are unlike a bite. A bite crushes. A goring opens an upward tear, driven by the curved shape of the tusk itself, following the arc of the animal's lift. Most injuries land on the lower leg and thigh, because that is where the head is aimed when a boar is level with a standing person. The animal strikes what is in front of it. And what is in front of it on a human is rarely the part we can afford to lose. Researchers who study boar encounters describe a common pattern: a single upward stroke, then withdrawal. The boar is not trying to dismantle you. It is trying to clear its path, and the goring is the tool it reaches for. One motion. Then it is past you and gone. From the ground, if you have been knocked down, the danger changes shape entirely. Now the tusks are level with everything. There is nothing ornamental about the design. The upward curve, the self-sharpened edge, the shoulder-driven lift, each part serves the same brief, brutal function. It is a weapon that only ever moves in one direction, up. But the most dangerous boar in the forest is not the armored male. It is the mother. A sow with a litter carries no tusks worth the name. She does not need them. What she has is a threshold, a distance around her piglets that she will not let you cross, and a willingness to spend her whole body defending it. Most large mammals give a warning first, a bluff, a display, a chance to retreat. A defensive sow compresses that sequence to almost nothing. The head drops, the feet plant, and she commits a short, hard rush aimed at driving the threat back before it can reach the young. Scientists who track wild boar attacks find a pattern worth respecting. A large share of the serious encounters with people involve not lone males but females guarding piglets. The armor and the tusks make the headlines. The mother makes the injuries. Picture the scene from the trees. A cluster of striped piglets crossing a trail, unhurried, and somewhere close but unseen the sow, reading the wind, counting her young, marking every shape that moves. You will not spot her until she decides you have come too near. Then the undergrowth simply detonates. She is smaller than the boars that fight each other. She is faster to commit than any of them. And where a male charges to pass through, a mother charges to make you leave, which means she does not stop at one pass. There is a reason the old woodland warning was never about the tusks alone. It was about the space around the piglets. Step into it, and the calm forest turns in a heartbeat into something else. Here is where honesty matters, because fear without proportion is just noise. For all the weaponry, the tusks, the shield, the charge, a wild boar is not a common killer of people. Deaths are rare. Across the world, in any given year, the number of humans killed by wild boar is small, far smaller than the number felled by bees or dogs or the family cow. The truth is quieter than the myth. Most boars flee the instant they catch human scent. The nose does the deciding, and the decision is almost always the same. Avoid, withdraw, vanish into the brush before the encounter can even begin. The dangerous meetings are the exceptions. A cornered animal, a wounded one, a sow guarding young, a hunter's dog forcing a confrontation that never had to happen. Strip those away, and the ordinary boar wants nothing to do with you. Researchers who compiled records of boar attacks on humans found something telling. A large share of serious incidents traced back to the animal being hunted, cornered, or provoked. The boar in most cases was reacting, not initiating. Think of it like a downed power line. Left alone, it lies there doing nothing. It becomes lethal only when something forces contact. So the picture is not a monster stalking the woods. It is a heavily armed animal that would strongly prefer you leave and reserves its violence for the moment. Retreat is taken off the table. That distinction is the whole point. The danger is real. It is also conditional. And understanding the condition is what separates respect from panic. The boar is not looking for you. It is hoping you never find it. Everything a boar does, well, it does with the front of its body. Look at the silhouette. The shoulders and neck are massive, the hindquarters comparatively slight, a body loaded toward the head like a wedge or a plow or a battering ram. Roughly the front 2/3 carries the mass, the muscle, the leverage. The back end is mostly there to push. This is not an accident of shape. It is the design that makes the rest possible. The rooting that turns fields to rubble, the goring lift, the charge that does not slow on impact, all of it draws on the same overbuilt forequarters. The boar is engineered from the neck forward. Watch one root for food. The snout drives into packed soil, and the whole front of the animal drops into the work. Shoulders, bunching forelegs brace the head, levering upward against ground that would defeat a shovel. A large male can shift stones and roll logs that a grown person would struggle to budge. The muscle here is dense, worked daily, never idle. Combine it with the low center of gravity, and you get an animal almost impossible to knock off its feet. Push a boar sideways, and it simply does not go. The weight sits too low and too far forward. There is a grim elegance to it. Predators built for speed carry their power in the hindquarters for the leap and the sprint. The boar carries its power up front for the collision. It is not built to chase. It is built to hit. And once you understand where the mass lives, the rest of the animal makes sense. The charge, the shield, the plow, all of it grows out of those shoulders. Now the scale of the problem widens from one animal to a continent of them. The wild boar has earned a title few creatures hold. Conservation scientists list it among the most damaging, invasive large mammals on the planet. Not a rat, not an insect. A 300-pound animal spreading across country after country, thriving in nearly every place it lands. What makes it invasive is not just that it moves in. It is that nothing native is prepared for it. Drop a boar into new ground, and it eats across every layer of the food web at once: roots, eggs, carrion seedlings, the young of other animals. It competes with the residents, and usually it wins. Biologists still debate exactly where the invasive line falls, in some regions where the native population ends and the introduced one begins, since the two blur wherever ranges overlap. But on the outcome there is little argument. Where the boar arrives, the landscape changes. Part of what earns the title is refusal. Most invasions can, in theory, be reversed. Trap enough, poison enough, hunt enough, and the numbers fall. The boar breaks that rule. It breeds faster than removal can keep pace, and it learns the tools used against it. Picture a stain spreading through fabric. You can blot one edge, but the color has already wicked outward faster than you can chase it. That is the boar across a map, always ahead of the effort to contain it. The title is not hyperbole. It is a summary of failure every campaign launched to stop it, and the animal still standing at the end. Most invaders eventually meet a limit. This one keeps moving. Nowhere shows this better than a country that never wanted them at all. In the United States, the wild boar was not native. It arrived, brought by settlers, escaped from farms, released for sport, crossed with feral swine until the bloodlines blurred into a single hardy hybrid. And from that beginning, the population did what boar populations do. Today, the best estimates put the number of wild pigs loose across the United States at around 6 million. 6 million animals scattered through dozens of states, most of them concentrated across the South, but pushing steadily north and west with every passing year. To picture 6 million, forget the figure and picture the city. That is roughly the human population of the entire Phoenix metropolitan area, every person in one of America's largest urban regions, replaced by a rooting, breeding, four-legged invader. Except these do not stay in one place. They spread, stand at the edge of a Texas field before dawn, and the ground itself seems to have been worked overnight. Soil overturned in long, dark ribbons. Fence lines undermined a season's planting, erased between dusk and sunrise. No machine did that. A sounder did and moved on before the light. The animals did not sprawl across the country slowly. In the span of a few decades, they multiplied and marched into territory that had never known them. States that reported almost none a generation ago now run active control programs that cannot keep up. 6 million is not a ceiling. It is a snapshot, a single frame of a number that climbs every year. The counting continues. The country tried to keep them out. It is now doing math on how many are already in. All those animals eat, and what they eat someone paid to grow. The wild boar's appetite carries a price tag, and in the United States alone, that price runs to billions of dollars every year. Crops destroyed, land torn up, livestock, threatened fences and equipment, wrecked control programs funded, damage repaired. The total climbs past $2.5 billion annually, and many researchers consider even that an undercount. The destruction takes more shapes than a plague of any single pest. A locust swarm eats the crop. A boar eats the crop, then plows the field it grew in, then fouls the water, then breaks the fence on the way out. One animal, many kinds of ruin, all in a night's work. Think of it as a storm that breeds. A flood does its damage and recedes. The boar does its damage and multiplies, so next season there are more of them to do it again, a disaster that reinvests its own profits into growing larger. Farmers describe waking to fields that look tilled by a drunk machine, rows uprooted irrigation, lines expose the flat ground, rendered into a churned brown mess that swallows a boot to the ankle. Insurance rarely covers it. The animals are gone by daylight, and the bill stays behind. The number keeps rising for a simple reason. More boar means more damage, and more damage funds more removal, and the removal never quite catches the breeding. The cost is not a fixed wound. It is a rising line on a graph that no one has managed to bend back down. $2.5 billion and climbing. That is the price of an animal we cannot switch off. At some point, the math stops favoring the fight, and a few places have admitted it out loud. Across parts of the boar's range, wildlife managers have quietly abandoned the goal of eradication. Not paused it. Not underfunded it. Abandoned it as a stated aim because the evidence says it cannot be done with the tools on hand. The new objective is not to erase the boar. It is to slow it. This is a rare admission in conservation. For most invasive species, removal remains at least a theoretical goal, an endpoint you might reach with enough money and will. For the wild boar in its worst strongholds, managers have crossed that goal off the board and replaced it with a lesser one. Contain, reduce, live with. The reasoning is cold arithmetic. To shrink a boar population, you must remove animals faster than they breed. Past a certain scale across rough terrain with animals that learn and hide and reproduce twice a year, that threshold simply cannot be met. Every dollar spent buys a slowdown, never a finish. It is like bailing a boat with a hole below the waterline. You can bail hard enough to stay afloat. You will never bail your way to a dry hull. The water is coming in faster than the bucket goes out, and the honest crews have stopped pretending otherwise. So, in certain regions, the language has changed. Officials no longer speak of eliminating the wild boar. They speak of managing it, a word that means stripped bare, that the animal has won the question of whether it stays. The only remaining question is how many. And even that, the boar keeps answering for itself. Here is the number that breaks people's intuition entirely. Studies of wild boar populations have found something that sounds like a misprint. To simply hold a population steady, not shrink it, just stop the growth, you may need to remove somewhere around 65 to 70% of the animals every single year. Kill 2 out of every 3, and the third rebuilds the whole crowd by spring. Sit with that. Most animals collapse under a fraction of that pressure, remove half of most large mammal populations year on year, and they spiral toward local extinction. The boar treats a 65% removal rate as a maintenance schedule. It is the price of staying level, not falling. The reason lives in the biology, which the later stages will open fully early, breeding large litters 2 rounds a year. But the consequence belongs here in the dread, because it reframes every control effort. When you hear that a region culled tens of thousands of boar, the instinct is to picture a population gutted. Often it was merely trimmed. Imagine a debt where the interest outruns your payments. You send in 2/3 of what you owe every year, faithfully, and the balance holds exactly where it was. That is a boar population under heavy hunting. Enormous effort spent entirely on standing still. Biologists call the extra push required to actually reduce the numbers steep well beyond that already brutal 2/3. Few programs anywhere sustain it. The animals recover between seasons faster than the guns can be reloaded year after year. 65% just to break even. It is not a statistic about hunting. It is a statistic about futility. While we hold the line in one place, the map is quietly redrawing itself in another. The wild boar does not merely fill the ground it occupies. It expands the ground it occupies, pushing into new counties, new states, new latitudes, and a steady outward creep that satellite-era wildlife surveys can actually watch happen. The edge of the range moves. Every year it moves again. In North America, the spread has been documented moving north and west across the continent, colonizing territory that a generation ago reported no wild pigs whatsoever. Canadian provinces that once considered themselves too cold now run monitoring programs. The line on the distribution map keeps sliding into places that assumed they were safe. This is what makes containment feel like chasing smoke. You can pour resources into one hot zone and genuinely suppress it there, and while you do, the population 2 states over is establishing a foothold no one was watching. The boar does not need the front door. It finds the gaps. Picture ink dropped into still water. It does not advance in a neat line you can stand in front of. It blooms outward in every direction at once, threading into spaces faster than any hand could follow. That is a boar range on a decade's time-lapse, not a march, but a spreading stain. Part of the expansion is the animals walking. Part is people moving them legally and not for sport. Part is the winter's warming, opening cold ground that used to hold the line. Together, the edges of the range keep dissolving outward. The map you learned is already wrong. By the time it is printed, the boar has moved past it. The boar carries more than tusks. It carries what lives inside it, and that may be the greater threat. A wild boar population is a reservoir. Not a metaphor, an epidemiological term for a living pool where a disease can persist, circulate, and wait. And the disease that makes agriculture officials lose sleep is African swine fever, a virus lethal to pigs, resistant to eradication, and carried silently through wild boar across whole regions. African swine fever does not sicken humans. It does something arguably worse for a food system. It kills domestic pigs at rates approaching the total. A herd can be all but wiped out once it enters, and there is no widely deployed cure or vaccine to stop it. Where wild boar carry it, the virus has a permanent home out in the landscape beyond the reach of any barn's biosecurity. That is the danger of a reservoir. You can lock down every farm, disinfect every boot seal, every fence, and the virus still sits in the woods in the wild population waiting for a single point of contact. The boar becomes a bridge between the forest and the food supply that nothing built by farmers can fully close. Think of it like embers scattered through a dry forest after a fire is declared out. You soaked the visible flames. But the embers are everywhere, unseen, and any one of them can start the blaze again. The wild boar is a landscape full of embers no hose can reach. And the fever is only the headline. The same animals move other pathogens, other parasites across the same wide ground. The tusk wounds one farm. The virus can empty 1,000. Now the harm turns toward the creatures that cannot fight back. A wild boar is an omnivore with no floor to its appetite, and among the things it eats are the eggs and young of ground-nesting birds. A nest built low in grass in reeds on the open forest floor is not a hiding place from a boar. It is a scent, and the boar's nose reads it like a map. Ground nesters evolved their strategy around predators that hunt by sight or that cannot cover ground thoroughly. The boar defeats both defenses. It works the ground methodically, snout down, missing almost nothing in its path, and a clutch of eggs concealed from a hawk's eye is wide open to a nose that reads the soil itself. The toll is not one nest. It is a pattern repeated across every field a sounder crosses. Conservation studies have tied boar presence to measurable declines in ground-nesting bird success in some areas, clutch after clutch lost, not to a specialist predator but to a passing generalist that simply ate what it found. Walk a meadow at dawn after a sounder has moved through, and the signs are there for anyone who looks trampled, grass, broken shell, the small, quiet absence where a nest used to be. No drama, no struggle worth the name, just a gap in the next generation of birds. This is the invisible half of the boar's damage. The crop loss makes the news because someone owns the crop. The lost broods make no headlines because the birds keep no ledger. But the ground remembers. Nest by nest, the boar rewrites what lives in the grass. The birds are only the beginning. The boar reaches higher into the young of the mammals around it. A newborn fawn survives its first weeks on a single strategy stillness. It lies flat in the tall grass, scentless as nature can make it motionless, waiting for the doe to return. Against a predator that hunts by eye or by movement, this works. Against a boar, it fails at the most basic level. The fawn's defense is built to defeat sight. The boar does not hunt by sight. It hunts by nose low to the ground, quartering the cover inch by inch, and a fawn pressed into the grass is not invisible to a snout that reads scent through soil. The very trick that hides it from the eyes of a wolf leads the boar straight in. Wildlife researchers have documented wild boar taking fawns in the vulnerable early window before the young are strong enough to flee. It is not the boar's main food. It does not need to be. An opportunist that crosses enough ground will find enough hidden young to matter to the deer that lose them. Picture the doe returning to the spot where she left her fawn, reading the trampled grass, the churned earth, the scent of something that passed through and did not leave hungry. There is no confrontation to witness, only an absence and a mother nosing the ground where a life had been. This is predation without specialization. A wolf is built to hunt fawns. A boar simply eats one when it stumbles across it, then keeps rooting for grubs. The casual nature is the horror of it. To the boar, the fawn was just another thing the ground gave up. Lower still, in the cold-blooded corners of the ecosystem, the appetite does not stop. Reptiles and amphibians make easy prey for an animal that turns over every surface it crosses. Snakes, lizards, frogs, salamanders, their eggs and their young, all of it falls within the boar's reach, and much of it lives exactly where the boar likes to dig under logs, in leaf litter, along the muddy margins of water. These animals rely on concealment and cold-blooded stillness. A frog freezes. A snake tucks beneath cover. A clutch of amphibian eggs sits jellied in a shallow pool. None of it evolved against a rooting mammal that lifts logs, strips litter, and works the shoreline like a machine. The boar simply uncovers a world built to stay hidden. In some fragile habitats, this pressure lands on species already clinging to survival. Island and wetland reptiles, amphibians with tiny ranges, animals with nowhere else to go. A rooting boar population can push a struggling population toward the edge, not through malice, but through relentless, indiscriminate foraging. Walk a wetland margin, a boar has worked, and the evidence is in the churn logs flipped and abandoned the mud along the water torn, and repouched the small hidden lives that sheltered there, simply gone from the accounting. A tidy edge unmade. The boar does not distinguish between a grub and a rare salamander. Both are protein under the same snout. The rooting that finds one finds the other, and the ecosystem's smallest, quietest residents pay a price the boar never registers. An omnivore with no floor eats from every level, and the lowest levels have the least room to spare. Then there is the danger the boar poses without touching a claw to anyone, the danger of a body on a road. A wild boar struck by a car at speed is a collision between two heavy objects, and the boar's build makes it uniquely bad for the vehicle. Low dense, front-loaded with muscle, it hits the car below the bumper line and rolls into the frame, a compact mass that can crumple a hood, shatter a windshield, and send a vehicle off the road entirely. Wildlife vehicle collisions with wild boar are a documented and rising hazard across their range, climbing in lockstep with the population itself. More boar means more animals crossing more roads at night, and the growth in the range has put them onto highways that never used to see them. The physics are unforgiving. A deer struck tends to be flung its long legs and lighter frame carry it up and over. A boar low and solid goes under and into. The car takes the full compact weight against its most vulnerable structures, and the driver takes what the car cannot absorb. Drive a rural road through boar country after dark, and the risk rides with you the whole way, a shape that might step from the verge without warning, poorly seen, even by the driver drawn to roadsides and crossing them at the exact hours the eye works worst. The boar's weak eyesight offers it no help here either. These collisions injure people who never went looking for a boar and never saw one coming. The animal's expansion did not stop at the field. It reached the road. The tusk is a threat to the few who meet it. The highway is a threat to everyone who drives. Return for a moment to the ground itself, because the boar's most constant damage is written into the earth. Rooting is the act that defines the animal. Snout down the boar drives into the soil and levers it upward, turning over the surface in search of roots, tubers, grubs, and worms. One boar working through a night can overturn a startling area of ground. A sounder can render a field unrecognizable by dawn. The scale is what stuns. Studies measuring boar rooting have recorded large swaths of soil disturbed in a single night's foraging pasture, meadow, forest floor, all churned into a rough brown ruin of upturned clods and exposed roots. It looks precisely like the work of heavy machinery. It was done by mouths. This is not incidental damage on the way to food. The turning of the earth is the feeding. And because the boar must eat every day, the plowing never stops. A field near a boar population is not damaged once, but reworked continually, given no chance to recover its surface before the next night's shift arrives. Stand at the edge of a rooted field in the low morning light, and the sheer thoroughness registers not a patch here and there, but systematic ruin, the flat green ground converted to a churned brown expanse that swallows the foot and holds overnight by animals that were gone before you woke. For a farmer, this is a crop destroyed. For a native meadow, it is the whole plant community torn open. For a hillside, it can be the first cut of erosion. The rooting does not merely take food, it remakes the surface of the land. And it does it again the following night. Bring it all together now, and the true shape of the dread appears not one boar, but the sounder as a moving front. A single boar is a formidable animal. A sounder, a group moving and feeding as one, is something closer to a force of nature. When a large group crosses open ground, it advances in a spread wider than a person is tall, every snout working, and it leaves the land behind it transformed. This is the image that holds all the others. The self-sharpening tusks, the shoulder shield, the charge, the appetite that spares no nest or fawn, the plowed field, the rising millions, all of it gathered into a single body of animals crossing the ground together, not marching, foraging, and unmaking everything as it goes. Nothing native turns it back. Not the deer whose fawns it takes, not the birds whose nests it empties, not the farmer whose fence it undermines. The sounder does not confront these things, it simply passes over them, and they are diminished in its wake. From a rise at first light, the sight is stark, a dark spreading mass low against the pale field, moving without hurry, and behind it a widening band of churned earth where green ground used to be. It does not charge across the landscape. It consumes across it at a walk. This is where the dread resolves. The danger was never really the tusk aimed at one person. It was the animal's refusal to be stopped by predators, by poison, by the guns and the fences, and the billions of dollars spent to hold it back. The forest has met the wild boar. And the forest is losing. Turn from what the boar destroys to how it is built and start where the animal starts at the tip of the nose. Inside, a boar's snout sits a bone that most mammals do not have. It is called the prenasal bone, a small, tough structure at the very front of the skull ahead of everything else, anchoring the disc of cartilage that forms the working face of the snout. It is, in plain terms, a plow blade grown into the skeleton. Most animals root, if they root at all, with soft tissue that tires and bruises. The boar roots with a reinforced instrument. The prenasal bone gives the snout a rigid leading edge, something to drive against packed soil, without the whole nose folding back under the load. The tool is not muscle wrapped around hope. It is engineered to dig. Behind that bony tip lies a disc of cartilage and a dense pad of tissue, and behind that, the massive muscles of the neck and shoulders that later stages of this story keep circling back to. The whole front of the animal exists to push this one hard point into the earth. Consider what that means. The boar did not learn to dig and then adapt. It carries the digging tool in its bones, present from birth, sharpened by evolution rather than by use. A shovel you are born holding. Up close, the snout looks almost comical, a flat, wet, wobbling disc forever twitching. It is easy to underestimate, but that soft disc is mounted on bone, driven by the strongest muscles the animal owns. The face of the boar is not a face at all. It is the business end of a machine for turning the world over. Give that bony tool the muscle behind it, and you get a force that does not belong on an animal. The rooting power of a wild boar is genuinely difficult to grasp until you see the results. A large male driving its reinforced snout into the ground can lift stones, roll logs, and overturn packed earth that would stop a person with a spade. The force runs from the planted forelegs through the loaded shoulders into that single hard point of bone. Measurements of what boar can move come out sounding like construction figures. Rocks a person would strain to shift roots woven deep into hard soil ground compacted by seasons of weather, the boar levers them up as a matter of routine night after night in pursuit of a few grubs beneath. The mechanism is leverage, not brute mass alone. The head becomes a lever, the neck, the fulcrum, the shoulders, the engine. Everything the animal built into its front end, the low center, the dense muscle, the reinforced snout, converges on this one motion, the upward heave that turns the earth. Think of it as a crowbar with an appetite. A crowbar multiplies your force at the tip, and a person leaning on one can move astonishing weight. Now give the crowbar 300 pounds of muscle and set it to work every single night, driven by hunger that never fully quits. That is why a rooted field looks tilled by machinery. It effectively was. The boar is a piece of earth-moving equipment that eats what it unearths and repairs itself and never needs fuel delivered. The strength is not for fighting, though it serves there too. It was grown first and always for the ground. Now to the instrument. The whole snout was built to serve the sense of smell, and a number that stunned the scientists who counted it. When researchers mapped the genome of the pig, they found something remarkable in the genes governing smell. The domestic pig and its wild ancestor carry one of the largest sets of functional olfactory receptor genes ever documented in a mammal, more working smell genes than a dog, more than a mouse, more than nearly anything else measured. Each of those genes helps build a different kind of scent detector in the nose. More functional genes means more distinct odors the animal can register, and finer distinctions between them. The boar is not merely good at smelling. It may sit near the summit of the mammalian world for the sheer machinery of the sense. This is the payoff for a life spent nose first in the earth. An animal that finds its food buried in the dark by scent alone cannot afford a mediocre nose. Evolution answered by building one of the most elaborate scent systems on the planet and mounting it on a plow. Consider what a set that large might do. Where you smell coffee, a boar reading the same air may separate the bean, the roast, the soil it grew in the hand that carried the cup, a symphony, where you catch a single note. Biologists still work to fully map how the boar uses all that capacity in the wild. The hardware is measured and confirmed. The full reach of what it perceives with it remains in part an open question, but the count is not in doubt. Among mammals, few noses are built like this one. Here is what that extraordinary nose is actually for finding a meal that no eye could ever see. A wild boar can smell food underground. Roots, tubers, truffles, grubs, and worms buried beneath inches of soil give off scent that rises through the earth, and the boar reads that faint signal, pinpoints the source, and digs precisely where the food lies. It does not search by luck. It searches by nose. This is the whole reason the rooting is not random. Watch a boar forage, and it does not plow blindly. It moves, pauses, reads the ground with the snout, and then digs at a chosen spot because the nose has already told it something edible waits below. The digging is the confirmation of a decision the nose already made. The most celebrated example is the truffle. These prized fungi grow entirely underground, invisible, releasing a scent that carries through the soil. And pigs were used for centuries to find them, precisely because a boar's nose locates a truffle. A person would never know was there. The animal smells a meal hidden in the dark of the earth itself. Picture the ground as a sealed book. To you, the cover gives nothing away. To the boar, the pages are open, the map of everything alive and edible beneath the surface. Read through the soil as plainly as you read a lit sign. This is the sense and the tool working as one system. The nose finds it, the plow retrieves it. The two are not separate talents, but a single hunting method aimed downward into a layer of the world closed to almost everything else. The boar does not walk over the ground. It reads it. Push the idea further and the snout stops being a nose at all. It becomes a hand. The disc at the end of the boar's snout is not only a scent organ and a digging blade. It is a sensory surface, richly supplied with nerves capable of feeling texture, temperature, and the shape of what it touches. The boar explores its world by pressing this disc against things the way you might explore an object in the dark with your fingertips. Rooting, seen this way, is not just brute excavation, it is investigation. The snout reads the soil as it works, the give of the earth, the resistance of a root, the wriggle of a grub, the density that signals food below. Touch and smell arrive together in the same instrument at the same moment. This dual role is unusual. In most mammals, the tools of smelling and the tools of manipulating the world are separate, a nose here, paws there. The boar folds both jobs into one organ. The snout that identifies the meal is the same snout that finds it, uncovers it, and turns it over to eat. Think of it as a combination of a bloodhound's nose and a safecracker's fingertips mounted on the front of a plow. It sniffs the target, feels its way to the exact spot, and breaks the ground open, all with a single, flexible, wet, endlessly probing disc. Watch one work a patch of soft ground, and the delicacy surprises you. For all the power behind it, the snout can move with a strange precision, nudging, testing, reading a heavy animal, handling the earth with something close to fingertip care. The boar does not have hands. It has something that, in the dark and the dirt, works even better. Move from the nose to the skin, and the boar reveals a strange gap in its own design. One, it has to work around every day. A wild boar barely sweats. The functional sweat glands most mammals rely on to shed heat are in the pig family nearly absent, so few and so weak that they contribute almost nothing to cooling the body. The animal that plows through the summer earth has no working way to sweat itself cool. This is why the old phrase, sweating like a pig, is one of the great misnomers in the language. A pig, in fact, cannot meaningfully sweat at all. The saying comes from ironworking, not the animal, but the biology is genuinely the opposite of what the words suggest. For most mammals, sweat is the frontline defense against overheating. Moisture on the skin evaporates, and the evaporation pulls heat from the body. Strip that away, and an animal covered in dense hair working hard in the sun faces a real problem: heat with nowhere to go and no built-in valve to release it. Think of a car with a powerful engine and no radiator. The engine runs fine in the cool, but push it hard on a hot day, and there is no system to carry the heat away. It simply builds and builds toward a limit. The boar runs a powerful engine indeed, all that front-loaded muscle, all that daily digging, generating heat with every heave of the shoulders. And it does it, wearing a coat under the sun, with the cooling system most animals depend on essentially switched off. That gap could have been a fatal flaw. Instead, the boar solved it not with biology but with behavior. And that solution is where we go next. The answer to a body that cannot sweat is a hole full of mud, and the boar treats it like precision equipment. Wallowing is the boar's cooling system outsourced to the environment. Unable to sweat, the animal finds water or soft mud, lowers itself in, and coats its body. As the moisture evaporates from its skin and hair afterward, it carries away heat, doing from the outside exactly the job that sweat does from within. This is not idle rolling in the muck. It is thermoregulation, deliberate and effective. Studies of pig behavior show wallowing rises sharply with temperature. The hotter the day, the more the animal seeks the wallow and the longer it stays. The boar reads its own heat and treats it at the mud. And mud outperforms plain water for the task. Water evaporates fast, and the cooling ends quickly. A coat of mud clings holds moisture against the skin and releases it slowly, extending the cooling long after a dip in clean water would have dried. The animal in effect chooses the better coolant. Picture it as wearing an evaporative cooler you smear on and carry with you. You step out of the pool and the chill is gone in minutes. Roll in mud and you walk away wearing your air conditioning for the rest of the afternoon. Stand near a wallow on a hot day, and the scene is one of pure animal contentment. A boar half sunk in the cool ooze, eyes narrowed in, no hurry at all. It is the least threatening the animal ever looks. It is also being quietly, precisely clever. The body forgot how to sweat. The animal remembered how to stay cool anyway. The mud does more than cool. Once it dries, it becomes armor against the small enemies and the large sky. A coat of dried mud is a barrier. It cakes over the skin and hair, and when the parasites that plague the boar, ticks, lice, biting flies, try to reach the animal, they meet a crust of earth instead of skin. Some are trapped in it. Some are scraped away when the boar rubs the dried mud off against a tree. The wallow is pest control. This is the second job of a single behavior. The boar rolls in mud to cool, and the same mud drying smothers and dislodges the parasites riding on its body. One act, 2 defenses, temperature and pests handled in the same wallow at no extra cost to the animal. There is a third layer still. Dried mud shields the skin from the sun. Domestic and wild pigs can sunburn pale-skinned individuals especially, and a coating of mud blocks the ultraviolet light before it reaches the skin. The wallow is sunscreen as well as coolant and pesticide. Think of what the boar has built from a puddle, a cooling system, a bug repellent, and a sunblock, all in one layer of dirt, all reapplied whenever it likes, all free. A person would need 3 products and a shopping trip. The boar needs a low spot that holds water. After the wallow, watch one work the caked mud off against a favored rubbing post, a tree worn smooth and dark by seasons of the same use, shedding the day's coat and the parasites with it. The mud that keeps it cool also keeps it clean. The puddle is doing more work than it looks. Now flip the season. The same animal that fights the summer heat also has to survive a cold that kills, and here the biology does the work. Against the cold, the wild boar wears a double coat. On the outside, long, coarse guard hairs, bristles that shed water and block the wind. Beneath them, a dense layer of soft, fine underfur that traps a cushion of warm air against the skin. 2 coats, 2 jobs, 1 animal insulated from the worst of winter. The outer bristles are the shield. They repel rain and snow, keeping the wet from reaching the skin, and they break the wind before it can strip warmth away. Water beads and runs off the guard hairs, leaving the vital inner layer dry, and a dry insulator works, while a soaked one fails. The inner underfur is the warmth. Fine and thick, it holds a still layer of air close to the body, and that trapped air is what actually insulates, the same principle as a down jacket, where the feathers matter less than the air they hold. The boar wears its own down beneath its own raincoat. Picture a good winter coat, a tough, weatherproof shell over a puffy, insulating lining. The shell keeps you dry, the lining keeps you warm, and neither works nearly as well without the other. The boar was born wearing exactly that arrangement, and it never takes it off. This is why boar push into cold country that ought to defeat them. The coat comes standard. An animal that looks built for mud and heat is underneath equally built to hold its warmth when the temperature drops below anything a bare body could survive. Summer, it beats with behavior. Winter, it beats with the coat it grew. But the coat has a limit, and where it ends, the boar starts building with its own snow. In the deep, cold, wild boar have been observed constructing shelters that researchers and observers have taken to calling with some affection pigloos. The animal digs and burrows into snow and vegetation, hollowing out a sheltered space, and lines it with gathered material to hold in warmth a nest against the freeze made from the freeze itself. The lining is the clever part. Boar have been seen gathering vegetation reeds, grasses, cattails, whatever the marsh or field provides, and packing it into these shelters as insulation. Snow forms the walls. The plant matter forms the bedding. Together, they trap body heat inside a pocket the boar has carved out of the winter. This is the same principle that keeps an igloo warm borrowed by an animal. Snow, for all that it is frozen, is full of trapped air, and trapped air insulates. Hollow out a space within it, add a layer of dry vegetation, and the warmth of the body inside can raise the interior far above the killing cold outside. Think of a child's snow fort that actually works walls of packed snow, holding the wind out a floor of dry reeds, holding the cold ground at bay, and inside warm enough to wait out the storm. The boar builds this, not for play but for survival, and it works because the physics are real. Come upon one of these in a frozen marsh, and it is easy to miss a low mound of snow and matted cattail until you notice the hollow and the warmth and the animal that made it. The coat holds the cold at bay. When the coat is not enough, the boar builds a house. Put the coat and the pigloo together and a pattern emerges. The cold, which should be the boar's natural border, keeps failing to hold it. For most warm-adapted animals, winter draws the map. There is a line of latitude, a depth of snow, a stretch of frozen weeks, beyond which the animal simply cannot persist, and that line becomes the edge of its range, fixed and final. The wild boar keeps stepping over that line as if it were a suggestion. The reasons stack. The double coat holds body heat. The snow shelters trap more of it. The layer of fat a well-fed boar lays down before winter burns slow through the lean months. And the animal's willingness to eat almost anything means it can still find food when the specialized feeders around it starve. Each defense is modest. Together, they conquer the cold. Biologists studying the boar's northward spread keep revising the maps. Ground, once written off as too harsh, too cold, too snowed in, too long frozen, turns out to hold viable populations because the animal brought more cold tolerance than anyone credited it with. The limit keeps moving north. Think of a fortress wall everyone assumed was solid, and an invader that keeps finding it was never as high as it looked. Winter was supposed to be the wall. The boar keeps walking through the gate. The full picture of how cold the boar can truly go and how fast it is getting there belongs to a later stage of this story, where the super pigs of the frozen north take the stage. Here, the mechanism is the point. The cold does not stop the boar. It merely slows the paperwork on where it lives. Return now to the weapon, but look at it as machinery, rather than menace, because the tusk's growth is a marvel in its own right. A boar's tusks never stop growing. They are ever-growing teeth, pushing outward from the jaw throughout the animal's entire life, gaining length year after year with no final adult size. The tusk you see on an old male is the accumulated growth of many seasons, still lengthening the day he dies. This is genuinely unusual among mammals. Most teeth erupt to a set size and stop, and once worn down, they are simply worn down. There is no more where they came from. The boar's tusks defy that rule. Like the incisors of a rodent, they grow continuously, replacing from the root faster than the tip wears away. The continuous growth is what makes the self-sharpening possible. Because the tusks keep pushing out, the constant grinding of upper against lower never files them down to nothing. The wear is offset by fresh growth from below. The animal can sharpen its knives forever, precisely because the knives keep regrowing. Picture a pencil that sharpens itself as you use it and never gets shorter no matter how much you write the lead, pushing up from inside as fast as the point wears away. That is the geometry of a boar's tusk: perpetual point, perpetual replacement, no end to either. The curve comes from the growth pattern too. The tusks do not grow straight but arc upper and lower, curving toward each other, which is exactly what keeps them meeting and grinding at the same working surface for the animal's whole life. The weapon in stage 1 was the threat. The weapon here is a small biological engine that never once shuts off. The shield too deserves a second look, not as armor in a fight, but as a structure the body builds on purpose. The shoulder shield of a mature male is a specialized tissue, and its structure tells you it was made for one job. It is a thickened layer of subcutaneous connective tissue and cartilage, dense and fibrous, laid down across the shoulders and flanks, precisely where an opponent's tusks strike during combat. The body reinforces the exact spot that takes the hits. What makes it remarkable is that the shield responds to use. It is not a fixed thickness handed out at birth. It develops as the male matures and thickens with the demands of fighting the tissue, building up in answer to the stress placed on it, growing tougher where it is tested most. This is the body reading its own experience and armoring accordingly. A young male carries a modest shield. An old battle-hardened one carries a slab of reinforced tissue several times thicker because seasons of combat told his body where the danger lay, and the body answered by building up its defense. Think of how a laborer's hands grow, calloused exactly where the tool rubs, not everywhere, but precisely at the points of contact, the skin thickening in direct response to the work. The boar's shield is that same logic scaled up into body armor, laid over the vital organs beneath. Cut into one, and the layered density is unmistakable tissue, built like a shield in fact, as well as named dense enough to blunt a strike that would open ordinary flesh. The shield is not decoration and not accident. It is armor the body forges in answer to the life the animal actually lives. Open the mouth past the tusks, and you find the rest of the toolkit, a full set of teeth built for an animal that eats everything. The wild boar carries the dentition of a true omnivore. Sharp canines for tearing flat molars, for grinding incisors, for cutting, and gathering the complete range because the boar eats the complete range. Meat roots, grain fruit, carrion, eggs, nuts. A mouth that must handle all of it needs teeth for all of it, and the boar has them. This is the anatomy of dietary freedom. A specialist carries specialist teeth, the slicing carnassials of a pure carnivore, the endless grinding plates of a pure grazer, and pays for that efficiency by being locked to one kind of food. The boar refused the trade. It kept every tool and kept every option open. The molars in particular are worth noting. Broad and low-crowned, they are built to crush and grind tough plant matter, hard-massed, fibrous roots, the bulk foods that carry a foraging animal through lean seasons. When the meat and the easy calories run out, those grinding teeth let the boar fall back on what the ground still offers. Think of the difference between a specialist's single perfect tool and a full workshop. A specialist tool does one job flawlessly and nothing else. A workshop does everything passably and never runs out of jobs it can take on. The boar carries the workshop. This is a quiet reason for the animal's success, easy to overlook beneath the tusks. The same jaw that grows the weapons also holds the versatility, the teeth that let a boar eat whatever the season and the ground provide. The tusks make it dangerous. The teeth behind them make it unstoppable at the table. Come back one last time to the engine that drives all of it, the forequarters seen now as pure mechanism. Everything anatomical the boar does with force traces back to the same overbuilt front end. The muscles of the neck, shoulders, and forelegs are dense, deep, and disproportionately large, giving the animal a power concentrated forward that the rest of the body simply serves. It is a machine organized around one region of muscle. That concentration is what links the tools together. The rooting snout needs the shoulders to drive it into the earth. The goring tusk needs the neck to throw the head upward. The unstoppable charge needs the forelegs to keep driving through impact. One engine room powering every heavy job the animal performs. The low center of gravity is part of the same design. All that mass carried low and forward makes the boar extraordinarily stable, hard to tip, hard to turn, hard to knock from its line once it commits. Try to shove one sideways and it does not yield because the weight sits exactly where it resists you most. Picture the front of a bulldozer, the mass, the low stance, the power, all gathered at the working end, everything behind it merely following. The boar is arranged on the same principle, a body that leads with its strength and drags the rest along behind. From the side, the profile tells the whole story. A high, humped shoulder tapering back to a slighter rear, the silhouette of an animal that put its entire investment into the front. The nose, the tusks, the charge, the plow. They are not four talents. They are one engine turned to four tasks. Internal note batch 8 fax 3640 arc stage uncanny. For all this machinery, the boar carries a genuine weakness, and it lives in the eyes. A wild boar sees the world poorly. Its eyesight is weak, set low on a head built for the ground, with a narrow field and little of the sharpness that predators and prey animals usually depend on. The boar that reads the earth so precisely with its nose is when it comes to seeing working at a serious disadvantage. The eyes are small relative to the skull positioned to look forward and down rather than to scan the horizon. An animal that spends its life with its snout in the dirt did not need to evolve keen distance vision. The important information was always underground read by scent, not overhead read by sight. So the eyes fell behind. This is why a boar can be approached sometimes from downwind, why a still, silent, scent-shielded observer can watch one at surprising range before it reacts. Take away the smell it relies on, keep quiet, and the boar's remaining window on the world is genuinely dim. It may look right at you and not resolve what it sees. Think of someone who has misplaced their glasses in a crowded room. They are not helpless. They can hear, they can smell, they navigate fine. But the visual world has gone soft and vague shapes without sharp edges. That is the boar's daylight all the time. The charge itself makes this vivid. A boar, committing to a full-speed rush at a target it can barely resolve, is running in part on faith and momentum, aiming with senses other than the ones doing the seeing. The animal is armored, armed, and powerful. And it is running half-blind through all of it. The eyes fell behind because the ears surged ahead, and what the boar cannot see, it hears. A wild boar's hearing is acute. Where the vision is weak, the ears more than compensate large mobile and sensitive swiveling to catch and place sounds across a wide range. The boar that struggles to resolve a shape at distance can hear the twig you break, the fabric of your jacket, the shift of your weight, and place it with precision. The ears move independently, each one turning toward a sound to fix its direction. Combined with the nose, this gives the boar a picture of its surroundings that owes almost nothing to sight, a world mapped in scent and sound, detailed and reliable, built from the two senses the animal actually trusts. This is why the approach that beats a boar's vision so rarely works in practice. You may stay out of its dim sight, but stay silent. It will not let you one snapped stick, one scuff of gravel, and the ears have you located before the eyes ever needed to. The animal defends the gap in its vision with the sharpness of its hearing. Picture navigating a dark house you know well. You cannot see, but you hear the creak of the floor, the hum of a room, the direction of a voice, and you move through it confidently on sound alone. The boar lives that way in daylight, its ears doing the work the eyes cannot. Watch one pause mid-forage, head-up ears, rotating like small dishes, reading the air for a sound that troubled it. In that moment, the weak eyes do not matter at all. The vision is the flaw. The hearing is the patch that makes the flaw survivable. Return to the smell one final time, because the boar does not just detect odor, it navigates in it in 3 dimensions. The boar's nose does more than announce that food or danger is present. It gives direction and distance, a spatial sense of where a scent originates, how far off it lies, which way it is moving. The animal reads the air, the way a sighted creature reads a landscape, building a map from molecules rather than light. Part of this comes from the sheer machinery already described, one of the largest working sets of smell genes measured in a mammal. But part comes from how the boar uses it, sampling the air and the ground, constantly comparing what each nostril catches, tracking how a scent strengthens or fades as it moves, triangulating the source. This is what lets a boar follow a food trail to its origin, locate a buried meal to the exact spot, detect an approaching threat while it is still far upwind. The nose is not a simple alarm that goes off. It is a navigation instrument, feeding the animal a running directional read of a world it can barely see. Imagine walking into a kitchen and not merely smelling that bread is baking, but knowing from the scent alone which room it is in, how far down the hall, and that someone just opened the oven door. That layered, located 3-dimensional reading of odor is close to the boar's ordinary experience of the air. Biologists are still mapping the full extent of how the boar uses this spatial sense in the wild. How much of its behavior is guided by a scent picture we can barely imagine. The hardware is measured. The lived experience of it remains in part a mystery to us. The world the boar sees is dim. The world it smells is vivid, detailed, and mapped in every direction. Now for the talent almost no one expects from an animal so bound to the earth, the wild boar swims and swims well. For a creature built like a plow, low and heavy and made for digging, the boar is a genuinely capable swimmer. It takes to water, readily moves through it with real strength, and covers distances that would strand many animals better known for it. The mud-loving digger is also quietly an accomplished swimmer. The build that seems wrong for it turns out to serve. That powerful front end, those driving forelegs, the same muscle that levers earth, also pulls the animal through water. And a boar that spends its summers wallowing is already comfortable getting wet. The water is not a foreign element, but a familiar one entered without hesitation. This is one more axis of the boar's refusal to be contained. A river that stops other animals is to a boar simply a crossing. Marsh lake flooded ground coastal channel terrain that fragments the range of a poorer swimmer stays open to an animal that treats water as one more surface to move across. Picture a heavy-set person you would never guess to be athletic, who steps into a pool and turns out to swim laps with easy, unhurried power. The body told you one story. The water tells another. The boar is exactly that surprise, wearing bristles. The full reach of this boar, crossing open water to colonize islands, threading waterways to reach new ground, belongs to the next fact and the wider story of the animal's spread. Here, the simple point stands on its own. The plow does not sink. It swims. Follow the swimmer to its limit, and the water stops being a barrier at all. It becomes a road to somewhere new. Wild boar have been documented crossing open water with purpose, not merely paddling across a stream, but covering real distance between shorelines, reaching islands, and stretches of ground separated from the mainland by water that ought to have kept them out. The crossing is deliberate, and it opens territory nothing else could give them. This is how boar reach places their legs alone never could. An island off a coast, a patch of ground ringed by wetland, a far bank across a wide channel, all of it becomes reachable to an animal willing and able to swim the gap. The water that isolates and protects other habitats offers the boar no such protection. The consequences ripple outward. Islands often shelter species found nowhere else. Ground nesters, reptiles, plants with no defense against a rooting mammal evolved for a world without one. When a swimming boar arrives on such a shore, it enters an ecosystem with no answer to it, and the damage from the earlier stages of this story lands on ground least able to bear it. Think of a moat around a castle and a besieger who simply swims it. The water was the whole defense. Against an animal that crosses it at will, the defense was never there at all, just an illusion of one, dispelled the first time the boar decided the far shore was worth the swim. Stand on a quiet island shore that should have no boar, and find the churned earth, the rooted ground, the unmistakable signature of an animal that arrived by water, and the strangeness of it settles in slowly. The plow crossed the sea, and it brought the whole apparatus with it. Everything so far has been body. Now the story turns to mind, and it opens with a mirror. Researchers set wild boar, a test that trips up most animals. They placed food where the boar could not see it directly visible, only as a reflection in a mirror. To reach it, the animal had to understand that the mirror was not another boar, not another space, but a surface showing something real located elsewhere, and then use that reflected information to find the hidden food. The boar passed. In the study, pigs learned to use the mirror's reflection to locate food hidden behind a barrier, then turned away from the mirror and went directly to the actual food. They treated the reflection as information about the world, not as a rival or a curiosity, a genuine cognitive leap. This matters because it is rare. Understanding that a mirror shows a real scene and acting on that understanding to solve a problem requires a kind of mental flexibility that most species never show. The animals we honor for intelligence, great apes, dolphins, certain birds sit on a short list. The boar's relatives earned a place near it. Think of glancing in a car's side mirror, and without a flicker of confusion, understanding that the vehicle in the glass is actually behind you and steering accordingly. You do it without thought. Most animals cannot do it at all. The pig remarkably can. Scientists still debate exactly how far this ability reaches, whether it reflects a broad understanding of representation or a narrower learned skill. The performance is documented. Its full depth remains a live question. The animal we called a brute passed a test built for the brilliant. And it was only the first. From mirrors to machines, because a pig can be taught to play a video game. In one of the more startling experiments in animal cognition, researchers trained pigs to operate a joystick connected to a computer screen. The animal moved the joystick with its snout, watched a cursor respond on the screen, and learned to steer that cursor into targets to earn a reward. A pig playing a simple video game on purpose. The achievement is layered. The pig had to grasp that moving the joystick moved the cursor, that its action here caused an effect there on a glowing screen it could not touch or smell. That link between a physical motion and an abstract on-screen result is a genuinely sophisticated piece of understanding, and the pigs made it. They were not fast, and they were not flawless, but they performed well above chance, steering the cursor to targets at a rate that could not be luck, demonstrating that the connection between joystick and screen was real to them, understood, and acted upon. An animal built to root in soil, manipulating a digital world through a controller. Picture a creature that has never seen a screen in its evolutionary history that navigates by smell in the dirt. Working out that nudging a lever makes a shape move on a lit panel, and then using that knowledge to win. The gap between what the animal was built for and what it managed to learn is the whole marvel. Researchers note the pig's performance shows conceptual understanding beyond simple trial and error, a flexibility that keeps surprising the people who test it. The boar's ancestor rooted for grubs in the dark. Its descendant learned to move a cursor with its nose. Behind the flashy tricks sits something more fundamental, a memory sharp enough to hold the world in place. Pigs remember. In controlled tests, they have shown strong memory for locations, for objects for which of several containers held food, and which did not, retaining that information over delays and using it to make correct choices later. The mind behind the snout keeps a detailed, durable record of what it has learned. This is not idle laboratory cleverness. Memory is the quiet foundation the flashier abilities stand on. To learn a mirror, a joystick, a trap, an animal must first be able to hold experience over time to carry yesterday's lesson into today's choice. The boar's memory is the ground all its other intelligence is built upon. In the wild, this memory does real work. A boar remembers where the food was, where the danger came from, which routes are safe and which are not, building a mental map of its range that guides it night after night. The forager that seems to wander is often navigating from a remembered store of hard-won knowledge. Think of returning to a city you visited once years ago and finding you still know the way from the station to the square, the turns surfacing as you walk a map you did not know you still carried. The boar holds its landscape like that and adds to it constantly. Researchers testing pig memory have been struck by both its accuracy and its persistence. Information retained well past the point where many animals would have lost it. The tricks make the headlines. The memory is what makes the tricks possible. Memory lets the boar look backward. The next ability lets it look forward and wait. Pigs can exercise self-control. In tests designed to measure patience, they have shown the capacity to forgo a smaller immediate reward in order to wait for a larger one, holding off on the sure thing in front of them in favor of a better payoff still to come. The animal can override its own impulse in service of a plan. This is harder than it sounds and rarer than you would think. Delaying gratification requires holding a future outcome in mind, valuing it against the present temptation, and mastering the urge to simply take what is available now. Many animals cannot do it at all. The immediate reward wins every time. The pig often can wait. The ability connects directly to the boar's success in the wild. An animal that can wait, that can pass up a risky feeding opportunity for a safer one later, that can hold back from a baited trap in favor of caution, carries a real advantage. Self-control is not just a laboratory curiosity. It is survival strategy. Recall the famous test where a child is left alone with one treat and told that waiting will earn a second, and how genuinely hard the waiting is, even for us. The pig faces its own version of that test and clears it more often than most of the animal kingdom. Scientists studying this note that the degree of self-control varies between individuals. Some pigs are markedly more patient than others, a spread of temperament that looks strikingly familiar. The boar remembers the past. And unusually for an animal, it can also choose to wait for the future. Here is the behavior that unsettles people most because it looks so much like a habit of our own. Some pigs wash their food. In observations of pigs given dirty food near water, individuals have been seen carrying or nosing the food to the water and washing the grit and dirt from it before eating. A deliberate act of cleaning performed with no instruction, apparently by choice. The animal preferred its meal clean and took a step to make it so. Food washing is a behavior that has fascinated scientists wherever it appears in the animal world because it hints at something beyond raw instinct. To carry food to water and clean it, an animal seems to be acting on a preference and a plan, not merely eating what is in front of it, but improving it first. That extra step is the interesting part. In pigs, the behavior suggests the same flexible, deliberate mind seen in the mirror and the joystick tests. This is not an animal locked into eat what you find reflex. It is an animal that can pause, assess, and choose to handle its food a certain way, a small act, but a telling one. Picture rinsing sand from a piece of fruit under a tap before biting in a gesture so automatic you barely notice doing it. When a pig performs its own version at the edge of a trough or a stream, the resemblance is close enough to give a person pause. Researchers are careful here. The behavior is documented, but how widespread it is and exactly what drives it remain open questions. Not every pig does it. Why some do is not fully settled. The animal we pictured as a mess in the mud sometimes stops to wash its dinner first, gather the laboratory results together, and a single ability emerges beneath them all. The boar solves problems it was never trained to face. Across the tests, the mirror, the joystick, the memory trials, the waiting games, the common thread is not any one trick. It is flexibility. The boar meets a novel problem, one no instinct prepared it for, and it works out a solution. That capacity to improvise, to reason toward an answer, is the real intelligence behind every individual feat. This is what separates a smart animal from a merely well-drilled one. A trained animal repeats what it was taught. A problem solver confronts something new and finds a way through, and pigs tested with unfamiliar puzzles do exactly that, reaching answers they were never shown. The learning is not rote, it is genuine. In the wild, this shows as an animal forever finding the gap. A fence with a weakness, a latch that yields to a determined snout, a barrier that gives way to patient pressure. Boar are notorious among farmers for defeating enclosures that were supposed to hold them, working out the solution through sheer, persistent ingenuity. Think of the difference between someone who has memorized one route home and someone who dropped anywhere in the city can find their own way back. The first knows an answer. The second understands the problem. The boar unnervingly often is the second. Scientists studying pig cognition increasingly place the animal among the more capable non-human minds, a ranking that would have seemed absurd not long ago, and that the evidence keeps reinforcing. The body made the boar formidable. The mind is what makes it impossible to keep out. That problem-solving mind turns its full attention on us the moment we start to hunt, and the boar's first answer is to disappear into the night. Wild boar are not strictly nocturnal by nature. But where hunting pressure rises, they shift, becoming far more active by night and far more hidden by day, timing their movement to the hours when the guns are absent and the humans are asleep. The animal reads the threat and rewrites its own schedule around it. This is a learned response, not a fixed trait, and that is what makes it striking. Boar in undisturbed areas may move freely in daylight. Push them, hunt them, harass them, and the same population goes dark, emerging only after nightfall to feed on the same ground it once crossed by day. The behavior tracks the danger. The shift is a direct counter to human effort. Daytime is when we hunt, farm, patrol, and watch. By moving its whole life into the dark, the boar slips beneath most of that effort, feeding, breeding, and spreading in the hours we are least able to stop it. It does not fight our pressure, it schedules around it. Picture a curfew imposed on a city, and residents who simply move everything they do into the permitted hours, the streets empty when the patrols pass alive again the moment they are gone. The boar imposes that pattern on itself, reading our habits and living in the gaps between them. Researchers tracking hunted populations see the change clearly in the movement data activity draining out of the daylight hours and pooling in the dark in direct proportion to how hard the animals are pressed. We hunt by day, so the boar decided to live by night. The same flexibility that empties the daylight also fills our cities, and the boars of Berlin have made themselves at home. In Berlin, wild boar have become genuine urban residents. They move through parks and gardens, cross roads, root up lawns and cemeteries and sports fields, and forage from bins and green spaces across the German capital, a population of large wild animals living inside one of Europe's major cities largely at night, largely unafraid. The city to a boar is simply another habitat with its own rules to learn. It offers food in abundance, gardens, waste plantings, the endless spill of a human population, and it offers safety since hunting is impractical among houses and streets. The boar weighed the trade and moved in, exploiting a niche the city never meant to provide. What makes it work is the learning. Urban boar figure out the rhythms of the city when the streets empty, where the food reliably appears, which spaces are safe to cross and when. They navigate traffic timetables and human routine. With the same adaptive intelligence, they turn on fences and traps. The city is just a harder puzzle, and they solve it. Picture a wild animal that has learned the schedule of a neighborhood better than some of its residents, which yards feed it, which hours are quiet, which route avoids the busy road. That is a Berlin boar moving through the human world with an ease that should not be possible. City officials have wrestled with the population for years, and the boar remained too clever to trap easily, too settled to drive out woven now into the life of the city itself. The forest animal learned the city, and decided to stay. Berlin is not alone. Reach the warm hills above Barcelona, and the same story is unfolding in a different climate. In Barcelona, wild boar come down from the surrounding hills into the streets of the city, foraging in parks and bins, approaching people wandering neighborhoods that back onto the wooded slopes. The Catalan capital has become one of the most cited cases of urban boar in Europe, and the encounters have grown common enough to shape city policy. The Barcelona boar have grown notably bold. Habituated to people, they have learned that humans often mean food, and some have taken to approaching residents directly, even confronting them for the bags and scraps they carry. The wariness that keeps a forest boar hidden erodes in a city that inadvertently rewards boldness. This is the adaptive mind cutting both ways. The same intelligence that lets a boar learn a city's rhythms also lets it learn that people are a food source, and once learned, that lesson is hard to unteach. A population that discovers humans mean easy calories presses that advantage, edging closer, growing bolder with each success. Picture a wild animal that has learned to read a grocery bag the way a gull reads a boardwalk, as a walking promise of food worth approaching, worth pressing for. The Barcelona boar made that association and act on it in broad daylight on city streets. There has even been the odd headline of a boar helping itself from a startled shopper's bag, a moment that is almost comic until you remember the size and the tusks of the animal doing the helping. The hills lean over the city, and the city increasingly belongs partly to the boar. South and east, in the ancient heart of Rome, the boar have claimed a capital that has stood for millennia. In Rome, wild boar have become a fixture of city life, moving in family groups through the streets, gathering around, overflowing waste bins, crossing roads, appearing in neighborhoods and near landmarks, foraging through the refuse of the eternal city. Large wild animals at ease among the traffic and the apartment blocks of a modern European capital. The Roman boar have tied themselves closely to the city's waste. Where rubbish accumulates, the boar gather, drawn by the reliable food learning, which bins fill which streets. Reward a visit, which hours are safest to work. The rhythm of the city's garbage became the rhythm of the boar's foraging, a schedule read and exploited. The sight of a sounder, a sow, and a line of striped piglets filing past parked cars and shuttered shops has become common enough in parts of Rome to feel almost ordinary to residents and startling to everyone else. It is a collision of the wild and the urban that the city never planned and cannot easily undo. Picture the improbable image: an animal older than the city itself, threading between the parked cars of a capital that has stood for over 2,000 years, entirely unbothered by the weight of the history around it. The boar does not know it is in Rome. It knows the bins are full. The population has become a genuine civic issue tangled in politics and public safety, and the simple difficulty of removing an intelligent animal from a dense city. Rome has outlasted empires, and it is now sharing its streets with the boar. Cross to the eastern edge of the Mediterranean, and the pattern holds even where the boar means something more. The wild boar of Haifa walk an Israeli city by night. In Haifa, wild boar have descended from the wooded slopes of Mount Carmel into the streets of the city, foraging through neighborhoods, gardens, and bins across the hillside town. They have become such a regular presence that the city and its residents have had to reckon with them directly, large wild animals moving nightly through a modern urban center. Haifa's geography made it almost inevitable. The city climbs a forested mountain, its neighborhoods threaded through and around the woodland of the Carmel, and that green, in a policy that limited hunting within the city, gave the boar both a route in and a refuge once they arrived. The forest and the city interlace, and the boar exploit the seam. What makes Haifa distinct is how settled the population has become. The boar move through the streets with striking confidence, grazing on lawns, crossing roads largely undisturbed, an urban wildlife presence that has divided residents between those who welcome the animals and those who want them gone. The city debates the boar the way it debates any civic question. Picture a wild sounder moving up a residential street at dusk past parked cars and lit windows as unbothered as a group of neighbors out for a walk. Utterly wild, utterly at home in a place built entirely by and for people. The Haifa boar have become in their way a fixture of the city's identity, argued over, photographed, tolerated, resented, and thoroughly established. 4 cities, 4 countries, 1 animal. The boar reads the human world, wherever it finds it. The cities prove the boar can learn a place. The trap proves it can learn a threat, and having learned it, refuse it. Wild boar are notoriously difficult to trap because they learn. A trap that catches a few animals often catches no more. The rest of the group, having witnessed the capture or sensed the danger, will not approach it again. The boar reads the trap for what it is and simply stops falling for it. This trap shyness is a real and documented obstacle to controlling them. Managers find that a trap's effectiveness collapses after its first successes. The surviving boar grow wary of the bait, the structure, the scent of human interference, and give the whole apparatus a wide berth. The tool that worked on day 1 is useless by day 10. The learning can spread through the group. When boar avoid a trap that has caught their companions, they are acting on shared information, the danger recognized, remembered, and behaviorally passed through the sounder. It is not one animal's caution. It becomes the group's policy, learned once and held collectively. Picture trying to catch mice with a snap trap that the mice have watched work and that they now recognize on sight, stepping around it, refusing the bait, treating it as an obvious threat rather than a free meal. That is a boar population after its first encounter with a trap. The gadget is burned. This is why control programs must constantly change tactics, new trap designs, new bait, new locations, always a step ahead of animals that learn faster than the tools can be reinvented. The trap catches the naive. The boar makes very sure it does not stay naive for long. Behind the individual cleverness stands a society, and at the center of it sits the matriarch. Wild boar live in groups called sounders, and these are matriarchal led and anchored by adult females, typically related, moving and foraging and raising young together. The mature males live largely apart, solitary for much of the year. The enduring social core of boar life is female, organized around the sows and their offspring. The matriarch's experience steers the group. She carries the map, the knowledge of where food lies, where danger came from, which routes are safe across the seasons, and the sounder benefits from what she has learned. The group's collective memory is in large part hers, and it guides them through a landscape she knows better than any of them. This structure is a strength in itself. A sounder, led by an experienced female, is a group pooling, knowledge-sharing, vigilance, coordinating movement far more capable than scattered individuals would be. The social organization multiplies the intelligence of its members, turning private lessons into shared advantage. Picture an extended family led by a grandmother who knows the whole country around them, where the water is, where the trouble was, when to move, and when to stay. The others follow not by accident, but because her knowledge keeps them alive. The sounder runs on the same principle. Researchers studying boar social structure find these female-led groups stable and enduring the bonds between related sows, lasting across seasons and generations. The lone tusked male is the image we carry. The real engine of boar society is the matriarch and the sisters around her. Within that female society lies a cooperation few would expect from a wild pig. The sows raise one another's young. In wild boar sounders, communal care of the young occurs, related sows, nursing, and watching over each other's piglets, sharing the labor of raising the next generation. The offspring of the group are not strictly each mother's private charge. To a real degree, they are the group's shared investment, tended in common. This communal nursing spreads the burden and the protection. A piglet whose mother is foraging may nurse from or shelter with another sow. Many eyes watch the young while the group moves. The vulnerable early weeks are covered by more than one adult. The cooperation raises the odds that the piglets survive. The behavior fits the matriarchal related structure of the sounder. When the sows in a group are sisters and kin, aiding one another's young is also aiding one's own bloodline cooperation that makes evolutionary sense and that shows up as genuine shared care in the daily life of the group. Picture sisters raising their children together under one roof, the babies tended by whichever adult is free, fed, and watched and protected in common, no one child strictly separate from the other's care. The sounder runs something close to that arrangement out in the wild. Researchers observing boar groups note this alloparental care given by adults other than the parent as part of what makes the sounder such an effective unit for producing and protecting young. The boar is armed and dangerous and destructive. It also helps raise its sister's children. Binding the whole society together is a voice richer than a grunt. The boar talks in a language of many sounds. Wild boar and their domestic kin possess a broad vocal repertoire, a range of grunts, squeals, barks, and other calls, each tied to different situations and carrying different meaning. This is not one all-purpose noise. It is a varied system of vocal communication used to coordinate a social animal's life. The calls do real work. Contact grunts keep a moving group together. Alarm calls warn of danger. Distinct sounds pass between a sow and her piglets. Other calls mark contentment, distress, or aggression. The sounder stays coordinated in part because its members are constantly meaningfully vocalizing to one another. Researchers studying pig vocalizations have found real structure in them, different calls reliably tied to different emotional states and situations, to the point that the animal's very sounds can indicate whether it is calm or distressed. The voice carries information a listener can read, and that other boar plainly do. Think of the difference between a single word repeated endlessly and a working vocabulary, a set of distinct sounds, each meaning something particular, combining to run the coordinated life of a group. The boar's voice is far closer to the second than the first. Scientists continue to map this repertoire and keep finding it richer than expected, an animal communicating more and more precisely than its reputation ever suggested. The sounder moves as one. It does so in part by never quite falling silent. Give a social animal a voice and a matriarch, and it starts to move as a single body, the sounder coordinates. A wild boar group does not forage as a loose scatter of individuals. It moves with coordination members, keeping contact, adjusting to one another, responding together to food and to threat. The sounder behaves at times less like a crowd of animals than like a single organism spread across the ground. The vocal repertoire and the matriarch's leadership are what make this possible. Contact calls hold the group's shape as it moves. The experienced female sets the direction. Alarm signals ripple through and turn the whole group at once. The coordination is not accident. It is the product of communication and leadership working together. This unity is a survival advantage in every direction. A coordinated group forages more thoroughly, watches for danger more effectively, and responds to threat faster than scattered animals could. The sounder that moves as one is harder to surprise, harder to catch, and harder to stop than the same number of boar acting alone. Picture a flock of birds turning together in the air, each bird responding to its neighbors, so the whole mass moves as one shape. The boar sounder is a slower, earthbound version of the same principle many animals, one coordinated motion bound together by constant signals. It is this coordination, as much as any single animal's strength, that makes a sounder crossing open ground such a formidable thing. The group is more than the sum of the boar in it. The individual boar is capable. The sounder moving as one is something more. The clearest proof of that unity comes in an instant, the alarm that empties a clearing before you understand what happened. When one boar in a sounder senses danger, it signals and the whole group responds at once. A sharp alarm call, a sudden bolt, and the reaction spreads through the sounder in a heartbeat, every animal turning and fleeing together, the clearing empty almost before the threat has registered what it did. This is coordinated flight driven by communication. The one animal that detected the danger did not simply flee alone. It broadcast the warning, and the group acted on it as one, the information traveling faster than any single boar could run, turning individual alarm into collective escape. The speed of it is what strikes an observer. There is no gradual scattering, no confused milling. There is a signal, and then there is absence, the sounder gone into the cover together in the time it takes to draw a breath. The group's shared vigilance means a threat detected by one is escaped by all. Stand at the edge of a clearing where a sounder feeds, make one wrong sound, and watch the ground empty, a dozen animals dissolving into the trees in an instant, the space they filled suddenly, silently vacant. It is a startling thing to witness, and it is over before you can react. This shared alarm is why a sounder is so hard to approach. To reach one animal, you must slip past the vigilance of all of them, and the moment any single boar catches you, the whole group is already gone. One boar sees the danger, and in a heartbeat, none of them are there. Turn from the group's reflexes to its knowledge, and you find a map held entirely in memory. The boar knows where the food is. Wild boar carry a detailed spatial memory of their range, a mental map of where food reliably appears held in the mind and used to guide their nightly movement. The forager does not rediscover its territory each night. It navigates from remembered knowledge, returning to the patches that have paid off before. This memory turns foraging from a search into a route. Rather than wandering blindly, a boar moves between known productive spots. The oak that drops acorns, the field with the good roots, the wallow, the safe crossing, following an internal map built from accumulated experience. Efficiency born of memory. The advantage is considerable. An animal that remembers where the food is wastes little effort finding it and can plan movement around known resources across a wide area. Combined with the sounder's coordination and the matriarch's leadership, this spatial memory makes the group a highly effective forager, working its range with knowledge rather than luck. Think of the way you move through your own neighborhood, not exploring but navigating, knowing without thought where the shop is, where the shortcut runs, which way leads home. The boar holds its far larger territory in the same practiced, remembered way. Researchers testing pig spatial memory find it strong and durable, the animals retaining and using location information with real accuracy, precisely the ability this wild navigation would require. The boar does not stumble onto its food. It remembers exactly where to go. That memory pays off most spectacularly in one season when the forest floods with acorns and the boar is ready. Many forests produce mast, the periodic heavy crop of acorns, beech nuts, and other tree seeds that falls in certain years far more abundantly than others. When the mast falls, the wild boar exploits it, fully feasting on the sudden glut, converting the windfall into fat and into young. The boar is built to cash in on abundance. This exploitation is tied to the boar's memory and timing. The animals know where the productive trees stand, and they arrive to work the ground beneath them as the crop drops, reading the season, remembering the sights, and converging on the food while it lasts. The mast is a feast, and the boar does not miss the invitation. The consequences reach into the boar's very numbers. A heavy mast year rich in food translates into well-fed sows, larger litters, and better survival of the young. The abundance of the forest, converting directly into an abundance of boar. The reproductive engine of the later stages runs hottest in the years the mast runs highest. Picture a harvest so rich it feeds a whole population into a boom. The good year, echoing forward in the swell of young, it produces the forest's generosity written into next season's numbers. The boar turns the mast into more boar. Scientists tracking boar populations find they rise and fall, in part with the mast cycle, the animal's fortunes tied to the rhythm of the trees. Boom, following bounty across the years. The forest offers a feast in its good years. The boar has never once declined it. Knowledge of where the food is becomes knowledge of where to go, and the boar moves across its range with the seasons. Wild boar undertake seasonal movements, shifting across their range as food and conditions change through the year, following the mast, the crops, the water, the weather, from one part of their territory to another. The animal is not fixed to a single spot. It moves with the calendar, tracking the shifting abundance of its world. This movement is guided, not random. The boar's spatial memory and its reading of the seasons combine to steer it toward wherever the food is richest at a given time: the ripening crop, the falling mast, the reliable water in a dry stretch. The animal navigates its year the way it navigates its night from knowledge. The seasonal movement is part of what makes the boar so hard to pin down and so effective at spreading. An animal that ranges widely with the seasons is an animal encountering new ground, exploiting resources across a large territory, and pressing constantly at the edges of where it lives. Movement is opportunity. Picture a herder who knows exactly where the grazing will be good in each season, and moves to meet it the summer high ground, the winter valley, the route between them worn by long practice. The boar reads its own landscape with that same seasonal knowledge and moves to where the year is richest. How the boar navigates these movements, how much by memory, how much by scent, how much by cues we have not fully identified, remains a subject of study. The movement is documented. Its full guidance system is still being mapped. The boar knows its range in space, and it knows how to move through it in time. Knowledge this hard-won is not lost. With each animal, the boar passes its lessons to the next generation. Much of what a young boar knows it learns from its elders, from the matriarch, and the experienced sows from watching, following, and imitating the adults of the sounder. The map of the range, the caution around traps, the timing of the food, the safe routes, and the dangerous ground, these pass from one generation to the next, through learning, not instinct alone. This transmission is what makes the boar's intelligence cumulative. A lesson learned by one experienced animal, a trap to avoid a field, to raid a route that works, can spread to the young that follow her, carried forward beyond the life of the animal that first learned it. Knowledge accumulates across generations rather than resetting each time. The implications for control are sobering. When a population learns to avoid a trap to feed by night to exploit a city, that hard-won caution does not die with the individuals. It is taught to the young, embedded in the group's behavior, passed down so that the population grows warier over time, learning faster than we can adapt. Think of a craft handed down through a family, the skills, the cautions, the tricks of the trade passed from elder to child, so each generation begins already knowing what the last one learned. The boar's survival knowledge moves the same way down the female line of the sounder. This is culture, in its most basic form, behavior transmitted socially generation to generation. And it means the boar we face is not just intelligent, it is getting wiser with every year we push it. The individual boar learns. The sounder remembers across the generations. Stand back now from all of it, and the full portrait of the mind we underestimated comes into focus. The wild boar we began with was a weapon tusks shield charge appetite. The boar we arrive at is something else entirely, an animal that uses mirrors, learns machines, remembers its world, controls its impulses, coordinates in groups, communicates in a real vocal language, and teaches its knowledge to its young. The brute was a mind all along. This is the reason the earlier stages read the way they did. The boar is not unstoppable merely because it is strong or because it breeds fast. It is unstoppable because it learns reading our efforts, remembering our tools, adapting its behavior, and passing that adaptation down. Every trap we set, every hunt we mount teaches it something, and it does not forget. The cognition and the resilience are the same story told twice. An animal this flexible, this quick to learn, this able to pool and pass on knowledge, is an animal that meets each new pressure with a new answer. The mind is why the body cannot be contained. The two were never separate. Picture the arc of it, the creature we pictured rooting mindlessly in the mud, turns out to sit among the more capable animal minds we have measured, waiting, planning, learning, teaching, adapting, always a step into ground we did not expect it to reach. We spent a long time calling the pig a symbol of appetite and filth. The animal all the while was quietly outthinking the assumptions we made about it, learning the very cities and traps and schedules we built to manage it, and carrying what it learned forward into every generation that followed. We underestimated the boar, and the boar patiently kept proving us wrong. The mind explains why the boar survives. The next stage explains why it multiplies, and it starts with how young it begins. A wild boar can breed before its first birthday. Under good conditions, a young sow reaches sexual maturity within her first year of life, sometimes at only a few months old, and begins producing young, while she is, by the measure of most large mammals, still barely more than a piglet, herself. This is startlingly early for an animal of its size. Comparable mammals take years to mature. The boar compresses that timeline dramatically. A female born in spring can in a good year be carrying her own litter before the next spring comes. The generations stack almost on top of one another. Early maturity is the first multiplier in the boar's reproductive math. The sooner a female breeds, the sooner her offspring breed, and the faster the whole population compounds. An animal that begins reproducing in its first year turns over generations at a pace slower maturing species cannot match. Think of compound interest that starts paying out almost immediately, no long wait before the returns begin the growth stacking from the very first season. The boar's early maturity front-loads its population growth in exactly that way. Scientists note that the age of first breeding shifts, with conditions well-fed sows in rich habitat mature earliest the boom of a good year, translating directly into younger mothers and faster growth. Why the timing flexes so readily is a question later stages will return to. Most large animals make you wait years for the next generation. The boar barely makes you wait one. Early breeding would mean little without numbers behind it, and the boar arrives by the half dozen. A wild boar litter is large. A sow commonly bears 4 to 6 piglets at a time, and under good conditions the number can run higher, still a single birth, producing a small crowd of young where many large mammals produce 1 or 2. The boar does not invest in a single offspring. It invests in a litter. This litter size is the second multiplier. Early maturity means a sow starts breeding young. Large litters mean each breeding produces many. Together they compound a female that begins early and produces 6 at a time, seeds the next generation at a rate that slower single-birth animals cannot approach. The contrast with comparable large mammals is stark. A deer typically bears 1 or 2 young. A large predator 1 to a handful. The boar routinely doubles or triples that, and the piglets well cared for in the communal sounder survive at rates that turn the large litter into a large number of new breeders. Picture the difference between a family that adds 1 child a generation and one that adds 6, and then imagine the 6-child families all starting before they are a year old. Within a few cycles, the second population dwarfs the first. That is the boar against its slower breeding neighbors. To picture a single good year's output, imagine one sow's spring litter alone, nearly filling a laundry basket with piglets, and then remember there are millions of sows, early to breed, and many at a time. The litter arrives fast too because the wait between mating and birth is remarkably short. A wild boar's pregnancy is brief. Gestation lasts under 4 months, so carrying her litter for roughly 115 days before giving birth, a fraction of the long pregnancies that slow the reproduction of comparable large mammals. From mating to a basket of piglets is barely a season. This short gestation is the third multiplier. Early maturity, large litters, and now a quick turnaround, each pregnancy occupies only a few months, freeing the sow to breed again sooner. The brief carrying time is part of what lets the boar pack so much reproduction into so little time. The contrast again is dramatic. Large mammals often carry their young for many months, some approaching or exceeding a year, a long investment that strictly limits how fast they can reproduce. The boar's under 4-month pregnancy breaks that limit turning the sow around quickly for the next round. Picture the difference between a process that takes most of a year and one that takes a single season. How much more the faster process can produce in the same span of time. The boar's short gestation is that faster process, and it feeds directly into the animal's explosive growth. The brevity sets up the fact that follows, because a pregnancy this short raises an obvious possibility that a sow need not stop at 1 litter a year. Early to breed, many at a time, and carried for barely a third of a year. And so the boar does what the short pregnancy makes possible. It breeds twice in a single year. Under favorable conditions, a wild boar sow can produce 2 litters in 1 year. With a gestation of under 4 months and a quick return to breeding after weaning, a well-fed female in a good habitat can raise 1 litter and be carrying the next within the same 12 months, doubling her annual output. This is the multiplier that turns fast growth into explosion. Early maturity, large litters, short gestation, and now 2 rounds a year, the factors stack on top of one another, each multiplying the last, until a single sow's annual production of young reaches a figure that leaves slower breeders far behind. 2 litters a year is not the boar's every year norm everywhere. It depends on food, on climate, on conditions being good. But where the conditions allow it, and the boar is very good at finding places where they do, the second litter roughly doubles the reproductive rate of an animal that was already breeding faster than almost anything its size. Picture a population where the mothers start before they are 1, bear 6 at a time, carry them for a single season, and do it twice a year. Run that forward even a few cycles, and the numbers climb past what intuition can follow. This is the arithmetic behind the millions. The pieces assembled describe an engine, and the next fact does the multiplication in full. 1 litter a year would be formidable. The boar, given the chance, makes it 2. Put every factor together, and the math stops being biology and becomes something closer to a chain reaction. Combine the maturity before 1-year litters of 4 to 6 or more, gestation under 4 months, up to 2 litters a year, and the wild boar's population growth turns exponential. Each generation does not add to the last, it multiplies it. And multiplication repeated produces the staggering numbers the earlier stages described. This is the engine behind everything. The 6 million in America, the 65% that must be removed just to break even, the range spreading across a continent, the abandonment of eradication, all of it traces back to this compounding arithmetic. The boar is unstoppable at root, because its numbers multiply faster than any effort to cut them down. The exponential nature is the crucial part. Linear growth adds the same amount each cycle and can be matched by steady removal. Exponential growth multiplies each cycle, and it outruns any fixed effort, climbing faster and faster until the curve turns nearly vertical. That is the shape of a boar population left unchecked. Picture a single pair and their young's young, each generation several times larger than the one before, arriving 2 rounds a year, the total not climbing a staircase, but launching up a curve. Within a few years, a handful becomes a horde. The arithmetic alone explains the invasion. This is why the boar defeats removal that would erase almost anything else. You are not fighting a number. You are fighting a rate of multiplication, and a rate unlike a number keeps generating no matter how much you subtract, as long as any breeders remain. The tusks and the mind made the boar formidable. The math is what makes it endless. Before the numbers swallow the animal entirely, look at what the engine actually produces: a piglet wearing stripes it will not keep. Wild boar piglets are born striped. Along their small bodies run pale horizontal lines against a darker coat, a pattern so distinctive it has a name, the humbug, after the old striped sweet. For the first months of life, a boar piglet wears a livery utterly unlike the plain adult it will become. The stripes are camouflage. Against the dappled light of the forest floor, the broken pattern of sun through leaves, the play of shadow across ground and litter, the striped piglet dissolves. The pattern breaks up the shape of the animal, hiding the vulnerable young in the exact habitat where they are born and hidden while the sounder forages. And then the stripes fade. As the piglet grows, the humbug pattern dims and vanishes, replaced by the solid coat of the juvenile, and then the adult, the camouflage discarded, once the animal is large and strong enough not to need it. The disguise belongs only to the dangerous early weeks and is shed with them. Picture the striped young dappled into invisibility among the leaf litter and the shafts of light there, and then not there, as the eye tries to hold them, and then picture the same animals a few months on, the stripes gone plain and dark, and no longer hiding. The livery served its season and was retired. there is a small poetry in it. The most defenseless stage of the boar's life wears the cleverest disguise and grows out of it precisely as it grows into the strength that makes disguise unnecessary. The adult boar hides from nothing. The piglet striped and still hides from everything. Return now to the engine at full throttle and see it whole, the reproductive machine that no amount of pressure has managed to stall. Assemble the parts one last time. A female breeding inside her first year. Litters of 4 to 6, sometimes more. A pregnancy of under 4 months. 2 litters in a good year. Communal care that carries the young through. It is not a set of traits. It is a machine, purpose-built to turn food and time into more boar, faster than almost anything can remove them. This machine is the beating heart of the boar's resilience. Everything the earlier stages described, the failed eradications, the 65%, the spreading map, is downstream of it. The body survives, the mind adapts, but it is the reproduction that replaces every loss and then adds to it. Cut the population and the engine simply rebuilds it. What makes the machine so relentless is that it runs on abundance. Give the boar food a mast year, a rated crop, a city's waste, and the engine spins faster, earlier maturity, larger litters, that crucial second round. The animal converts good fortune directly into young, seizing every good year to surge. Picture a factory that not only replaces every unit removed from it, but speeds up its own production line whenever supplies run rich. The more you take, the harder it runs, the better it is fed, the faster it builds. That is the boar's reproduction, working against every effort to reduce it. The factual heart of this stage is simple, and it is enormous. The boar outbreeds us. It always has. The engine's output spread across a landscape becomes the image that opened this whole story. Millions of animals across a continent. The reproductive machine, multiplied across a range, produces populations counted in the millions. The roughly 6 million in the United States is one figure among several. Across Europe, across Asia, across the animal's vast global range. The boar numbers in the many millions more, a species present in enormous abundance nearly everywhere it lives. This is the engine made visible at continental scale. Each of those millions traces back to the same compounding arithmetic, the early breeding, the large litters, the 2 rounds a year repeated across generations, until a handful of founders becomes a population that defies counting. The math of one so written across a continent. The scale is genuinely difficult to picture. Millions of large wild animals spread across whole countries, present in forests and farmland and cities alike, breeding faster than they can be removed. A biomass of boar that rivals or exceeds that of many of the wild mammals we consider common. The animal is not merely present, it is everywhere in force. To hold 6 million in the mind, picture the population of a major American city, every resident of a Phoenix or a Philadelphia, and then replace each person with a rooting, breeding boar and scatter them across the countryside rather than gathering them in streets. That is one nation's share alone, and that share is only a fraction of the global whole. The engine runs in one sow. Its output covers continents. Those millions are not sitting still. The boar's range creeps outward, year on year, measured in territory the size of small nations. The wild boar's range is expanding, and the expansion can be measured. In some regions, the animal's distribution has been documented, pushing outward by tens of thousands of square miles per year, the occupied territory growing at a pace that turns a map from one decade to the next into 2 different pictures. The boundary does not hold. It advances. This expansion is the engine spilling over its edges. A population that multiplies faster than its habitat can hold pushes outward, the young dispersing the range, creeping into new ground, the frontier of boar country advancing steadily into territory that recently had none. Growth in number becomes growth in area. The pace astonishes the people who track it. Tens of thousands of square miles a year is not a slow seep. It is a rapid colonization, whole regions transitioning from boar-free to boar-occupied within a span of years, the animal claiming new country faster than most invasions move. The map cannot keep up. Tens of thousands of square miles a year is an area the size of a small country claimed annually. Imagine a nation the size of Ireland or Denmark added to boar territory every year and added again the year after. That is the frontier's speed in the regions where it moves fastest. Where the boundary of boar country lies today is not where it will lie next year or the year after. The engine does not only make more boar, it makes more boar country. Follow that expansion to its full extent, and the boar's reach turns out to be nearly planetary, a footprint on almost every continent. The wild boar and its feral descendants are among the most widely distributed large mammals on Earth. Native across much of Europe and Asia, introduced and established across the Americas and Australia and countless islands, the boar now occupies a range that spans nearly every continent, an animal present in some form across most of the habitable world. This global spread is the ultimate expression of the engine and the adaptability together. An animal that breeds this fast and adapts this readily, once introduced to new ground, establishes and expands almost anywhere, and human hands carrying the boar across the world for food and sport gave it the introductions it needed to. Reach continents its own legs never could. The breadth of habitat is as striking as the breadth of geography. The same species thrives in European forest, Asian jungle, American swamp, Australian outback, and the frozen north, a range of environments that few large mammals can match. The boar did not adapt to one world. It adapted to nearly all of them. Picture a single animal at home in a Polish woodland, a Texas thicket, a Roman street, an Australian scrubland, and a Canadian snowfield, the same species thriving in each. Few creatures larger than a rat can claim such a spread. The boar is one of them. The next facts break this range into its climates and extremes, from tropical heat to frozen tundra, from the smallest island boar to the giants of the north. The engine started in one forest. Its output now touches nearly everyone on Earth. Break that global range into its extremes, and the span of climates the boar tolerates becomes almost hard to believe. Tropical heat at one end, frozen tundra at the other. The wild boar lives across an extraordinary range of climates. It thrives in the wet heat of tropical and subtropical forest, and it thrives in the deep cold of northern winters, the same species holding populations from steaming jungle to snowbound taiga. Few large mammals span so wide a band of temperature and terrain. This breadth is the payoff of everything the earlier stages described. The wallowing and the near-absent sweat glands equip it for the heat. The double coat and the snow shelters equip it for the cold. The omnivore's teeth and adaptable diet let it find food in either. The boar carries in one body the tools for opposite worlds. No single adaptation explains it. It is the combination behavioral cooling for the heat-insulating coat for the cold, dietary flexibility for both, and a mind that learns each new place that lets the boar occupy the full sweep between the tropics and the frozen north. The animal is not specialized for a climate. It is generalized across them. Picture a creature equally at home in a sweltering swamp and a snowbound forest, sweating out the heat in a mud wallow one season, tunneling into snow the next, and grasp how rare that range is. Most animals are built for one end of the thermometer. The boar covers nearly the whole of it. This climatic reach is the deepest root of the boar's global success. An animal that can live nearly anywhere on the temperature scale is an animal with almost nowhere it cannot go. Heat does not stop it. Cold does not stop it. Within that vast range, the individual animal grows fast, from striped piglet to full weight in a remarkably short climb. A wild boar grows quickly. From the small striped piglet, the animal puts on size and weight at a rapid pace, reaching much of its adult mass within its first year or two, a fast climb from vulnerable newborn to formidable adult that matches the speed of everything else in its life cycle. This rapid growth serves the same relentless strategy as the fast breeding. The sooner a young boar reaches size, the sooner it is strong enough to survive, to fight, to breed, and the faster the whole population turns over. Quick growth and early maturity work together, compressing the boar's path to adulthood into as little time as possible. The pace is fueled by the boar's appetite and dietary range. An animal that eats almost anything and eats a great deal of it has the raw material to build a large body fast, the omnivore's flexibility converting whatever the season offers into rapid gain. Food becomes size with little delay. Picture a newborn that will within a single year grow from something you could cradle in two hands to an animal that could knock you off your feet. The transformation packed into a span most large mammals spend still half-grown. The boar does not linger in adolescence. This fast growth feeds directly into the animal's numbers and its resilience. Young boar reach breeding size quickly, and a population that grows its members fast rebuilds its losses fast. The piglet is small and striped and hidden. It does not stay that way for long. Growth this fast raises a natural question: how long does a wild boar actually live? A wild boar's lifespan in the wild is not especially long. Under the pressures of predation, hunting, disease, and hard seasons, many boar live only a handful of years, commonly in the range of several years, with a good number not reaching old age at all. The wild life is short and hard, yet the animal's reproductive strategy makes a long life unnecessary. Because the boar breeds so early and so abundantly, it can produce a great many descendants within just a few years of life. The short lifespan more than compensated by the speed and volume of reproduction packed into it. The boar does not need decades. It needs a few fertile years, and it uses them fully. The potential lifespan is longer than the wild average. In protected conditions, free from hunting and predation, boar and their domestic relatives can live considerably longer, well over a decade. The short wild lifespan is a product of pressure, not of the animal's built-in limit. Remove the pressure and the boar lives on. Picture a strategy that does not gamble on any single animal lasting long, but on producing so many so fast that the population endures, regardless of individual fate. The bloodline secured not by long life, but by relentless renewal. The boar plays that game and wins it. This is why hunting struggles against the boar even as it kills so many. Shortening lives means little to an animal that has already bred before it dies. The individual boar may not live long. The population renewing itself constantly, effectively never dies. Across that vast range, the same species turns out to come in wildly different sizes. The boar is not one size, but many. Wild boar vary enormously in size across their range. From the smaller boar of some southern and island populations to the large-bodied animals of the north and east, the species spans a striking range of weights and dimensions. The same animal in one region, a fraction of the size it reaches in another. There is no single boar size. There is a spectrum. This variation follows the geography and the climate. In colder regions, boar tend toward larger bodies. Greater mass helps retain heat, a pattern seen across many animals as they range toward the poles. In warmer and more marginal habitats, smaller bodies prevail. The boar's size bends to the world it lives in. The range is wide enough to surprise. A modest boar in one population might be dwarfed by a giant of another, the same species varying several-fold in weight from its smaller forms to its largest, a spread that reflects how many different worlds the animal has adapted to occupy. Picture two boars side by side, one from a warm southern island, one from a cold northern forest, and the northern animal looming over the southern like a different creature entirely. Though both are the same species shaped by different homes, the boar is a template filled out differently wherever it lives. This variability is itself a kind of adaptability, a species flexible enough to take the size its environment rewards, rather than being locked to a single form. One species, many sizes, each shaped by its own corner of the world. At the top of that spectrum stand the giants. The largest wild boar reach a scale that turns the animal into something formidable indeed. The biggest wild boar are enormous. In the largest populations, mature males can reach weights of several hundred pounds. Animals that stand tall at the shoulder carry a massive front end and bear tusks and shield to match. The upper end of the boar's size range produces a genuinely imposing beast. These giants are the earlier stages danger-made flesh. The self-sharpening tusks, the shoulder shield, the front-loaded power, the unstoppable charge, all of it scales up in the largest animals into a creature that few things in its habitat would willingly confront. Size amplifies every weapon the boar carries. The largest recorded wild boar have reached weights that stagger belief well beyond what the average animal attains, into a range that puts them among the most massive of their kind ever documented. The upper limit of the species runs far higher than its typical form suggests. To hold the scale of a big northern boar, picture an animal that could look a tall person in the chest, weighing as much as several grown adults combined, and remember, it can run at you faster than you can flee. The giants are not gentle exaggerations of the ordinary boar. They are the ordinary boar's every trait magnified. These are the animals at the extreme of the boar's range of size, the largest expression of a species that varies more than almost any other large mammal. Most boar are formidable enough. The giants are something a person does not forget. Here is where the boar's resilience passes into something that stops sounding like biology and starts sounding like defiance. The animal thrives where we cannot live at all. In the Chernobyl exclusion zone, the vast contaminated region abandoned by people after the nuclear disaster, wild boar flourish. In the decades since the reactor failed and the humans left, the boar population has grown and spread through the empty radioactive land, occupying towns and fields and forests that our own species fled and cannot safely return to. The reason cuts to something stark. For the boar, the radiation is a lesser threat than the thing the zone removed us. With the people gone, the hunting stopped, the farming ceased, the roads emptied, and the pressure that limited the boar everywhere else simply lifted. The contamination that drove humans out left behind a refuge, and the boar took it. This is resilience's paradox. The land too dangerous for people became a haven for wildlife, and the boar, adaptable, fast-breeding, unbothered by the absence of humans, became one of its great beneficiaries. The zone that stands as a monument to catastrophe is for the boar some of the safest country it knows. Picture a poisoned, abandoned landscape, its towns silent and its fields returned to forest and moving through it in abundance, the boar, thriving in the one place its greatest enemy dares not follow. The image is difficult to hold. It is also true. The boar carries the mark of the place in its body, traces of radioactive contamination that linger in the animals of the zone, to this day, a signature the closing stage of this story will return to. We made a place too dangerous for ourselves. The boar moved in and called it home. Chernobyl was not the last time. On the other side of the world, the same story repeated itself. The boar of Fukushima inherited another abandoned land. After the nuclear disaster at Fukushima drove people from the surrounding region of Japan, wild boar moved into the emptied towns and countryside. As at Chernobyl, the departure of humans opened the land to the animals, and the boar, quick to exploit any vacancy, spread through the evacuated zone, occupying the streets and houses and fields the people left behind. The pattern is the same as Chernobyl's, which is what makes it so telling. Two disasters, two continents, two abandoned zones, and in both the same animal seized the space. This is not coincidence. It is the boar's nature reliably repeated wherever human pressure lifts. Even in the shadow of catastrophe, the boar advances. The Fukushima boar became so established that they moved into the abandoned towns themselves, wandering streets, entering buildings, taking over the human spaces left vacant. When the evacuated zones were eventually opened for people to return, the returning residents found the boar already in possession. A wild population settled into their empty homes. Picture a town abandoned by its people, its houses standing silent, and wild boar moving through the streets and into the doorways, as though the animals had simply been waiting for the humans to leave. That is the scene the Fukushima evacuation left behind. The two zones together make the point unmistakable. It was not something particular about Chernobyl. It is something general about the boar. Empty the land of people anywhere on Earth, and the boar will fill it. The cold that was supposed to be the boar's final frontier is falling too, and in the far north a new kind of boar is being forged. Across the Canadian prairies, an animal that has come to be called the super pig is spreading, a hybrid of wild boar and domestic pig bred originally for farming, now loose and thriving in one of the harshest cold climates the animal has ever faced. Large, hardy, and cold-adapted, these hybrids are conquering the frozen north that was meant to stop them. The super pig combines the worst of both parents from our point of view. The wild boar's hardiness, intelligence, and survival instinct crossed with the domestic pig's large size and fast growth. The result is an animal bigger than a wild boar, tougher than a farm pig, and superbly equipped to survive brutal Canadian winters. A creature engineered half by accident for resilience. Their cold survival is remarkable. These pigs dig into the snow, build the insulated shelters described earlier, grow the heavy coat and the thick fat, and endure winters that ought to be lethal, establishing populations across the Canadian prairies and pressing toward the northern United States. The cold frontier long, the boar's limit is being overrun by an animal bred to beat it. Picture a boar built larger and hardier than nature alone would make it, tunneling into a prairie snowdrift to wait out a temperature that would kill an ordinary pig, surviving breeding, spreading in country everyone assumed was too cold. Hold it. That is the super pig, and it is coming. The full question of how far these animals will spread belongs to the final stage of this story. The North was the last natural barrier. We accidentally bred the animal that could cross it. Beneath all of it runs the strangest resilience of all. The boar appears to breed harder the more we kill it. Wild boar populations under heavy hunting pressure show a phenomenon that borders on the perverse compensatory reproduction. Rather than simply declining under pressure, the population responds by breeding faster, earlier maturity, larger litters, higher output, as though the very act of killing boar prompts the survivors to reproduce all the harder. The pressure meant to reduce them provokes them to multiply. The mechanism appears tied to resources. When hunting thins a population, the survivors face less competition for food, more to eat per animal, better condition, and thus earlier breeding and larger litters among those that remain. The cull that was meant to shrink the population instead feeds a reproductive surge in the survivors. Removal becomes, in effect, fertilizer. This is the cruel heart of the hunting paradox that the final stage will confront in full. An animal that breeds harder when hunted turns our chief weapon against it into a stimulant, every cull clearing the way for the next surge, the population rebounding not despite the pressure but partly because of it. It is resilience that fights back. Picture pruning a hedge and watching it grow back thicker at every cut, each removal answered by fuller, faster regrowth, the effort to reduce it feeding the very vigor you were trying to check. That is a hunted boar population responding to the blade with abundance. Scientists are still working to pin down exactly how far this compensation reaches and precisely what drives it, a mechanism documented in its effects, but not yet fully explained. The closing stage will return to the mystery. We hunt the boar to reduce it, and the boar maddeningly answers by breeding more. Stand back now and take the resilience whole as a single sum, because assembled it describes an animal that may be as close to unstoppable as any large creature on Earth. Gather it all. The body that beats heat and cold alike, the mind that learns our every effort, the engine that outbreeds every cull, the range that spans nearly every continent and climate, the thriving in poisoned zones we fled, the hybrids conquering the frozen north, the reproduction that surges under the very pressure meant to end it. No single trait explains the boar. It is the sum that astonishes. Each of these alone would make a hardy animal. Together layered one atop another, they make something that has defeated every serious attempt to control it. an animal so redundantly equipped for survival that removing one advantage merely leaves a dozen others intact. The boar does not have a weakness that unravels the rest. It has depth. This is what the word resilience truly means applied to the wild boar. Not toughness in one dimension, but survival built along every axis at once. Physical, mental, reproductive, geographic, so that whatever pressure comes from whatever direction, some part of the animal is already equipped to absorb it and carry on. Consider what we have thrown at this animal across the span of the modern age. We have hunted it with dogs and guns and helicopters. We have poisoned it, trapped it, fenced whole regions against it, and spent billions of dollars on its removal. We have driven it from farms and cities and killed it by the millions year upon year, in a campaign as sustained as any we have waged against a wild creature. And at the end of all of it, there are more wild boar in the world than when we began spread wider breeding, faster and thriving now, in the very places our disasters made too dangerous for us. The animal did not merely survive the effort to erase it, it grew. We brought everything we had, and the boar is still here, more of it every year than the year before. Before the story closes, it has to reckon with what the boar actually is to us, and it begins with a debt we rarely acknowledge. Every farm pig on Earth descends from this animal. The wild boar is the ancestor of the domestic pig. Thousands of years ago, humans took the wild boar and through generations of selective breeding shaped it into the domestic swine that now feed much of the world. Every pig in every barn, every breed on every farm traces its bloodline back to the wild boar of the forests. This makes the boar one of the foundational animals of human civilization. Domesticated independently in more than one region of the world, the pig became one of the earliest and most important livestock animals, a source of food that helped sustain the growth of settled human society. The wild boar did not merely survive alongside us, it helped feed our rise. The relationship runs deeper than descent. The two remain the same species, close enough that domestic pigs gone feral revert toward the wild form, regrowing the coat, the tusks, the wariness, the very traits breeding had softened. The wild boar lives inside every domestic pig, waiting and emerges within a generation or two of freedom. Picture the animal in the barn and the animal in the forest as the same creature wearing two faces, one shaped by us for our purposes, one shaped by the wild for its own, and each able to become the other. The distance between them is far smaller than it looks. There is an irony worth holding. The animal we struggle so hard to control in the wild is the same animal we domesticated to sustain us, a partnership and a war waged with the same creature. We made the pig from the boar. And the boar has never stopped being the pig's true self. Turn from what the boar means to us to what it does to the land, and the first truth is destruction, on a scale that reshapes whole ecosystems. Through its rooting, the wild boar is an ecosystem engineer, an animal that physically reshapes the environment it lives in. Turning over vast areas of soil in its endless search for food, the boar alters the land itself, and in doing so, changes the conditions for every other living thing that shares it. Its impact is structural, not incidental. On the destructive side, the toll is heavy. Rooting tears up native plant communities, disrupts the soil, spreads invasive weeds into the broken ground, damages the habitat of other species, and can accelerate erosion on vulnerable slopes. In fragile or invaded ecosystems, a boar population can drive real and lasting ecological harm. This is the ecological weight of everything the earlier stages described. The plowed field, the emptied nest, the taken fawn, the churned wetland assembled across a whole landscape and repeated season after season. They add up to an animal that engineers its environment toward its own ends, often at the expense of what lived there before. Picture a machine that reworks the surface of the land wherever it goes, turning soil, uprooting plants, remaking habitat, running continuously across whole regions, guided by nothing but appetite. That is the boar's effect on an ecosystem writ large. And yet, and this is where the story turns, the same rooting that destroys can also create. The plow that ruins is in another light, the plow that renews. The next fact turns the coin over. The boar engineers the land. Whether that engineering harms or helps depends on where you stand. Because the same act that tears an ecosystem apart can also be the thing that keeps it alive, the boar's rooting builds as much as it breaks. The wild boar's rooting has a constructive side. Turning over the soil aerates it, mixes nutrients through it, and creates disturbed ground where certain seeds germinate and certain plants thrive, a natural tilling that some ecosystems evolved with and depend upon. In its native range, the boar's digging is part of the machinery that keeps the land healthy. The boar is also a disperser of seeds. Seeds eaten and carried in the gut or caught in the coat and moved across the range are spread to new ground and planted in effect by the animal's own movement and digging. The forager that eats the fruit becomes the gardener that sows it, carrying plant life across the landscape. The soil turnover matters too. By mixing and aerating the ground, breaking up compacted earth, and cycling nutrients toward the surface, the boar's rooting can enrich the soil and support the very plant communities it also disturbs. In the right ecosystem, this disturbance is not damage, but renewal, the churn that keeps the system dynamic and fertile. Picture the plow again, but this time, as the farmer's tool, it has always been turning and enriching the earth to make it yield. In its native lands, the boar is that plow, running wild, disruptive, yes, but also tilling, sowing, and cycling the ground. It works. This is the paradox at the heart of the boar's ecology. The same behavior is destruction in one place and renewal in another, harmful where the animal is invasive, beneficial where it belongs. The act does not change, only the context does. The boar breaks the land. And in the land that made it, the boar also keeps it living. For all the harm and all the renewal, the boar is also something older and simpler in the web of life. It is food for the great predators. Across its native range, the wild boar is prey. Wolves, bears, big cats, the tiger, the leopard, and other large predators hunt the boar, and in many ecosystems it forms a significant part of what sustains them. The animal that dominates so much of this story is to the great hunters, a meal that keeps them alive. This places the boar in a role its power and resilience can obscure. For all its weapons and its wits, it sits within the food web as a prey animal, abundant, widespread, and nourishing, a foundation that helps support the predators at the top. The boar's very success makes it a reliable food source for the creatures that hunt it. The relationship is not one-sided, and it is not easy for the predator. A grown boar is dangerous, prey, armed, powerful, and willing to fight, and hunting one carries real risk for even a large predator. The boar taken is often the young, the old, or the weak. The prime adult is a formidable and sometimes lethal opponent. Predation shapes the boar, but the boar shapes its predators too. Picture a tiger stalking a sounder in the Asian forest, the great cat and the armed boar, predator and prey locked in a contest as old as both species, neither outcome guaranteed. This is the boar in its most ancient role, feeding the wild that also made it. The full weight of this relationship, what happens when the predators are removed, belongs to the next stage of the story. The boar is armed and formidable. It is also, and always has been, someone's dinner. Hold all these roles together, and the boar's true place in the food web comes clear. It is a linchpin tied to everything around it. The wild boar sits at a crossroads of its ecosystem. It is prey to the great predator's engineer of the soil, disperser of seeds, competitor and predator to smaller creatures, and shaper of the plant communities around it. Few animals connect to so many others. The boar is woven into its ecosystem at nearly every level at once. This connectedness is why its presence or its absence ripples so widely. Remove the boar and predators lose prey, certain plants lose their disperser, the soil loses its tiller. Add it where it does not belong, and native species lose ground, habitats are torn up, competitors are overwhelmed. The boar does not touch one thread of the web, it touches many, and pulling on it moves the whole. This is the deepest sense in which the boar carries ecological weight. It is not a peripheral animal present, but replaceable. It is a hub, a species so entangled with its surroundings that its fate and the fate of its ecosystem are bound tightly together. What happens to the boar happens in some measure to everything around it. Picture the food web as a net, and the boar as one of the knots where many strands meet. Pull on that knot, and the tension runs outward through the whole mesh, shifting everything connected to it. The boar is that kind of knot in ecosystem after ecosystem across the world. To understand the boar, then, is to understand it as neither villain nor hero, but as a linchpin, an animal whose enormous influence flows precisely from how thoroughly it is tied to the living world around it. The boar is not one role in the ecosystem. It is the knot where many roles are tied together. The boar's place in the web is ancient, and that is a fact worth pausing on. This is a lineage of survivors tested across a very long stretch of time. The wild boar belongs to an old and successful line. Pigs and their relatives have existed for millions of years, and the wild boar itself is an ancient species, one that has persisted through vast spans of time, through changing climates and shifting worlds enduring, where many contemporaries did not. The resilience we have traced is not new, it is deep. This long history reframes everything the earlier stages described. The adaptability, the toughness, the flexible diet, the quick reproduction, these are not recent tricks. They are the accumulated inheritance of an ancient lineage honed across ages of survival, tested against every kind of pressure that passing epochs could bring. The boar is resilient because resilience is old in its blood. The lineage's success shows in its spread and its persistence. An animal that has lasted this long and ranged this widely and survived this much carries the evidence of a design that works, a body plan and a strategy proven across more time than our own species has existed. The boar was surviving long before there was anyone to hunt it. Picture the depth of time behind the animal, an unbroken line of survivors stretching back across ages, each generation passing down the traits that let the next endure, the whole long chain arriving finally at the boar in the forest. Today, it carries all of that history in it. There is a humbling perspective in this. We tend to see the boar as a modern problem, a recent invasion, a current nuisance. It is in truth one of the old survivors of the living world, briefly and futilely opposed by us. The boar is not a new arrival. It is an ancient survivor, and we are the newcomers. Which brings the story finally to us, because the boar's modern spread is not something that happened to us. It is something we did. We started this. The wild boar's global expansion was accelerated again and again by human hands. We carried the animal across the world, introducing it to new continents and islands for food and for sport, deliberately releasing it into lands it could never have reached on its own. The boar did not swim to the Americas or Australia. We brought it. This is the first hard truth of the boar's entanglement with us. The invasion we now struggle to contain is in large part our own doing, the product of centuries of humans moving the animal, planting it in new ground, and setting it loose. We seeded the very problem we now spend billions fighting. The map of boar country was drawn in no small part by us. The introductions were rarely reckless in intent. They were for food, for hunting, for use sensible enough in the moment, disastrous in the long run, as an adaptable and fast-breeding animal released into new country with no predators prepared for it did exactly what such an animal does. We opened the door. The boar walked through it. Picture the animal being carried aboard ships to new continents, released into new forests, planted deliberately in country after country, and then picture what an animal this resilient inevitably did once it arrived. The outcome in hindsight was written the moment we let it go. This is the beginning of a longer reckoning. The spread we blame the boar for is a spread we set in motion, and the story only deepens from here. We did not merely fail to stop the boar. We are the reason it is everywhere. We did not stop at carrying the boar across oceans. We blurred what it even is escaped farm pigs mixing into the wild until the bloodlines ran together. Much of the world's feral pig population springs from domestic animals gone wild. Farm pigs that escaped or were released reverted to the wild form bred with true wild boar, where the two met and produced the hybrid feral swine that now range across regions like the American South. The animal we fight is often a mix of the wild boar and the pig we made from it. This blurring is a second layer of our entanglement. We did not only move the wild boar, we created the domestic pig, let it loose, and let it merge back into the wild line, manufacturing in effect a new and especially hardy animal from the collision of the wild and the domesticated. The feral swine of many regions are our creation twice over. The hybrids can be formidable, as the super pigs of the north already showed. The domestic pig's size and fast growth, crossed back into the wild boar's hardiness and wits, can yield animals tougher than either parent alone, a reversion that does not simply return to the wild form but sometimes exceeds it. Our farming gone feral came back stronger. Picture the two streams flowing together, the wild boar out of the forest and the farm pig out of the barn meeting, mixing and producing a feral animal that carries the strengths of both. We tended each stream separately. Where they joined, we lost control of both. The bloodlines we so carefully separated for our own use ran back together the moment we stopped watching. We made the pig from the boar, then let the two become one wild thing again. And now, without moving a single animal ourselves, we are opening new country to the boar. The winters are warming and the frontier is falling. The boar's northward spread is being aided by a warming climate. As winters grow milder and shorter, the cold that once held the boar's range in check weakens, and ground that was formerly too harsh becomes survivable, opening new territory to an animal already pressing at the frontier. The changing climate is rolling back the boar's last natural barrier. This is a third layer of human involvement, subtler than the others but no less real. We are not carrying the boar north. We are making the north habitable for it, the warming we have driven softening the winters that used to stop the animal cold. The boar advances into country we are, in effect, thawing open ahead of it. The effect compounds with everything else. An animal already equipped for cold, already breeding explosively, already spreading fast, meets a frontier that is retreating before it, and the expansion accelerates. The super pigs of the Canadian prairies press toward a northern United States, whose winters are year by year becoming less of an obstacle. Picture the boundary of boar country as a line held by winter, and picture that winter slowly weakening the line it defended, dissolving the ground beyond it, opening to an animal that was only ever held back by the cold. That is the frontier today giving way. We are not releasing the boar into the north. We are removing the barrier that kept it out. The cold was the last thing holding the line, and we are quietly turning the cold down. There is one more way we feed the boar's success, and it is almost too neat. We feed the boar directly, and we killed off the predators that ate it. Humans have aided the boar from both ends of the food chain. We provide it food through crops, through the waste of our cities, and in some places through deliberate feeding for hunting, swelling its numbers with resources it could never have found alone. And we removed its predators, hunting the wolves and big cats that once kept boar numbers in check to scarcity across much of their range. The combination is devastatingly favorable to the boar. More food and fewer predators is precisely the condition under which a fast-breeding animal explodes, the brakes removed, and the fuel poured on at the same time. We engineered without meaning to the ideal circumstances for a boar population to run wild, abundance above safety below. This is the fourth layer of our entanglement, and perhaps the most self-defeating. The predators we eliminated were the natural check on the very animal we now cannot control, and the food we provide is the very fuel its reproductive engine runs on. We dismantled the boar's limits and then handed it the means to grow. The result was inevitable. Picture a fire and imagine removing everything that might contain it while steadily feeding it more fuel. The outcome is not in doubt. We did exactly that to the boar population, cleared away the predators that would have checked it and fed it from our fields and our waste until it surged. We took away the wolves. And then we set out the food. And then there is the cruelest twist of all. The one weapon we relied on most may be making the problem worse. The more we hunt the boar, the harder it breeds. Hunting, the chief tool we use against the wild boar, can backfire. Because the animal responds to heavy pressure with compensatory reproduction, breeding earlier. Breeding more, an intensive hunt that removes many boar, can provoke the survivors into a reproductive surge that refills the population sometimes, leaving little net gain for all the effort. The cull can feed the very thing it meant to cut. This is the hunting paradox, and it strikes at the heart of how we try to control the boar. We hunt to reduce the population. The population answers by breeding harder, and the reduction we bought at great cost is partly undone by the surge our own hunting triggered. The harder we push, in some cases the harder the boar pushes back. The paradox deepens when hunting scatters the sounders. Disrupting the social groups can send boar dispersing into new territory, spreading the population rather than shrinking it. The pressure that was meant to contain the animal, instead helping it expand. Poorly aimed the hunt does the boar's colonizing for it. Picture spending enormous effort to bail out a boat only to find your bailing has widened the leak, the very action meant to solve the problem, quietly worsening it. That is the hunting paradox effort, that can, in the wrong conditions, accelerate the thing it opposes. This does not mean hunting never works. Carefully designed, sustained, and severe enough, it can reduce populations. But the naive assumption that killing more boar simply means fewer boar runs headlong into an animal that treats our pressure as a prompt to multiply. We reach for the gun to reduce the boar. And the boar too often answers by making more of itself. Set every layer side by side, and the reckoning becomes unavoidable. This crisis is from top to bottom our own creation. Look at the full ledger of our involvement. We carried the boar across the world. We bred the domestic pig and let it merge back into the wild line. We are warming the winters that open new ground. We feed the animal, and we killed its predators. And our chief means of control can provoke the very breeding it aims to stop. At nearly every turn, the boar's success bears our fingerprints. This is the weight the whole story has been building toward. The wild boar is not an external enemy that arrived to plague us. It is to a striking degree a problem we manufactured through introductions, through domestication, through the reshaping of climate and food and predators, through the very campaigns we mounted against it. We are not merely fighting the boar. We are in large part its author. The recognition changes how the crisis reads. The boar's resilience is real and ancient and extraordinary in its own right. But the scale of the modern boar, the millions, the continents, the invasions, is not the boar's achievement alone. It is a collaboration, mostly unwitting, between an exceptionally adaptable animal and a species that kept at every stage, removing its limits and adding to its strength. Picture the boar's global triumph as a structure, and then notice how much of the scaffolding was raised by human hands: the introductions, the escaped stock, the warming, the feeding, the vanished predators. Take our contribution away, and the structure is far smaller. What we face is in large measure what we built. There is no villain here to blame but the mirror. The boar did what any resilient animal would do with the openings we gave it. We did not inherit the boar problem. We made it opening by opening over centuries. Now, the story turns toward its final mysteries, the questions science cannot yet answer, and the first is the strangest of them all. There is a radioactivity in these boar that should not be there, and no one fully understands why. For years, scientists puzzled over the wild boar paradox. In parts of Europe, boar carried levels of radioactive contamination that stayed stubbornly high long after the fallout from Chernobyl should have decayed away, remaining radioactive when the deer and other animals around them had returned to safer levels. The boar stayed hot, and no one could fully explain it. The mystery lay in the timing. Radioactive cesium from Chernobyl should have declined steadily over the decades, and in most wildlife it did. But the boar defied the curve, holding contamination far higher and far longer than the Chernobyl fallout alone could account for. Something was keeping the boar radioactive that the standard explanation could not cover. The likely answer, when researchers found it, reached back further than anyone expected. A significant share of the boar's contamination traced not to Chernobyl at all, but to an older source, the radioactive fallout from nuclear weapons testing decades earlier. a second and older layer of contamination compounding the two reactors. The boar carried the mark of two nuclear eras at once. The mechanism runs through the boar's diet. The animals feed heavily on underground truffles, which absorb and retain radioactive cesium from the deeper soil, cesium that migrated slowly downward over the years from the older bomb tests and the newer disaster alike. The boar, digging for its buried meals, eats the contamination the truffles concentrated and carries it in its body. The boar became a record of our nuclear age, written in its own flesh. And even now, the full story of that contamination is not entirely closed. The paradox opens onto a deeper uncertainty: how long that radioactive signature will actually last. And the honest answer is that no one is sure. The contamination in the boar may persist far longer than anyone would wish. The particular radioactive signatures involve the cesium from weapons testing and from Chernobyl both decay over timescales measured in decades, and the deeper cesium continues its slow migration through the soil toward the truffles this boar eats. How long the boar will stay contaminated is a question without a firm answer. Part of the uncertainty lies in the slow movement of cesium through the earth. The contamination does not simply sit and decay. It migrates downward through the soil over the years, reaching the deep-growing truffles on a delay that stretches the problem out, so that the boar may keep encountering the contamination for far longer than the raw decay rate alone would suggest. The timeline is longer and murkier than a simple calculation implies. And there is a further darker dimension. Any future nuclear event, any new fallout, would layer onto what is already there, compounding the contamination the boar already carries. The animal that records our nuclear past would record our nuclear future too, adding each new signature to the old, its flesh, a running ledger of every atom we release. Picture the boar as a slow archive of the atomic age, holding the trace of tests fired before most living people were born of a disaster, decades gone and standing ready to absorb whatever comes next. How many more decades that archive stays, radioactive scientists genuinely do not know. This is the first of the story's true unknowns, a question that will outlast everyone now asking it. The boar carries the mark of our nuclear age. How long it carries it, no one can yet say. The nuclear mystery is only the first unknown. The second cuts closer to the animal itself. The surge in breeding under pressure is real, and science still cannot fully explain how it works. Compensatory reproduction remains only partly understood. Scientists have documented that hunted boar populations can breed harder, earlier maturity, larger litters, higher output under the very pressure meant to reduce them, but the precise mechanism behind it is not fully settled. The effect is observed. The full cause is still being worked out. Several explanations are on the table. Reduced competition for food among the survivors, giving each animal more to eat, and thus earlier and larger breeding. Shifts in the population's age structure after a cull. Changes in behavior and dispersal under pressure. Each likely plays a part, but exactly how they combine and why the boar responds so much more strongly than many other animals remains an open scientific question. The earlier maturity is its own puzzle within the puzzle. What signals a young sow to begin breeding months earlier under certain conditions? How food and pressure and population density translate into the timing of first reproduction is understood in outline but not in full. The boar's body reads its circumstances and adjusts its breeding, and the details of that reading are not yet fully mapped. Picture researchers watching a population refuse to shrink under heavy hunting, seeing plainly that it is outbreeding the pressure and yet not being able to specify with certainty every lever the animal is pulling to do it. The what is clear. The exactly how is still in part a mystery. This is the second unknown, and it sits at the very center of why we cannot control the animal. We can see the boar breeding harder the more we hunt it. We still cannot fully explain how it manages the trick. The third question looks forward to the frozen frontier. How far will the super pigs go, and are the hybrids adapting faster than anything we have seen? No one knows how far the super pigs will spread. The cold-adapted hybrids, advancing across the Canadian prairies, are pressing toward the northern United States, and the ultimate limit of their range, how far north, how far south, how fast, remains genuinely uncertain. They are moving into new country faster than the forecasts can keep up, and where they stop, if they stop, is unknown. The deeper question is about the hybridization itself. When wild boar hardiness crosses with domestic pig size and growth, the result can exceed either parent. And scientists are still working to understand whether this mixing is actually speeding the animal's adaptation, letting it acquire cold tolerance and vigor faster than ordinary evolution would allow. The hybrids may be a shortcut to resilience we do not yet fully grasp. If they are, the implications are considerable. An animal that can hybridize its way to new adaptations rapidly, combining traits across the wild and domestic lines to meet each new challenge, would be adapting on a timescale that leaves conventional control far behind. Whether the super pig represents that kind of accelerated adaptation is a question researchers are only beginning to answer. Picture the northern frontier as an open question mark, the hybrids advancing into it larger and hardier than the boar that came before, and no one able to say with confidence where the advance ends or how quickly the animals will keep improving as they go. This is the third unknown, not where the boar has been, but how far and how fast it is still becoming something new. The super pigs are spreading north, and we do not know what they will have become by the time they stop. Which leaves the largest question of all, the one that gathers every other into itself. Is there any ceiling to the boar's adaptability at all? This is the question that haunts everyone who studies the animal. At every turn, the boar has met a limit and passed it. Heat, cold, hunting, poisoning, cities, contaminated zones, frozen frontiers, each was supposed to hold it and each gave way. And so the honest scientific question is no longer where the boar's limit lies. It is whether the boar has a limit at all. Every barrier we assumed was final has proven temporary. The winters that held its range are warming and falling. The cities that should repel a wild animal have become its habitat. The disasters that drove us out became its refuge. The hunting that should reduce it prompts it to breed. Time and again, the ceiling we imagined turned out to be a door, and the boar walked through it, into ground we did not think it could reach. Perhaps there is a true limit somewhere, some environment, some pressure, some frontier the boar genuinely cannot cross. Perhaps its adaptability, however vast, is finite, and we simply have not yet found its edge. Or perhaps the animal's real gift is not any single adaptation, but adaptability itself, an open-ended capacity to meet whatever comes with no fixed ceiling at all. Science cannot yet say which is true. Picture every wall we have watched the boar climb, and then picture the next wall, whatever it turns out to be, and ask honestly whether you would bet on the wall or the boar. After everything this story has traced, the safe money is uncomfortable to name. This is the final unknown, and the one that matters most. We keep discovering the boar has no limit where we expected one, and we are running out of places to look for the limit that stops it. So this is where the story leaves the wild boar, not defeated, not contained, not even fully understood, but standing at the center of a world it has quietly mastered. We began in a dark forest with an armed animal moving through the undergrowth. We traced its weapons, its strange and brilliant body, its unexpected mind, its relentless engine of reproduction. It's spread across nearly every climate and continent on Earth. And we ended here at the reckoning, the recognition that its triumph is bound up with our own choices, and that the questions it poses are ones we cannot yet answer. The boar carries all of it at once, the self-sharpening tusk and the mirror-reading mind, the double coat for the cold and the mud wallow for the heat, the litter of striped piglets and the millions across the continents, the radioactive truffle and the pigloo in the snow, the ancient lineage and the newly bred super pig. No single image holds this animal. It is the accumulation that stuns. And through every stage, one thread held. We hunted it, poisoned it, fenced it, outnumbered it, and spent fortunes trying to erase it, and it grew. Not despite our effort, but partly because of it, breeding harder as we hunted, thriving in the ruins we fled, spreading through the doors we kept unknowingly opening. The animal absorbed everything we brought and turned much of it to advantage. Stand once more at the edge of that forest in the last of the light and watch the sounder move across the churned ground. Unhurried, unbothered, entirely at home, in a world that has thrown everything it has at this animal and failed to move it even slightly off its course. There is no fear in the way it moves. There is no need for any. It has outlasted our worst, and it is still quietly spreading. We have spent a very long time asking how to stop the wild boar. Perhaps the harder truth, the one this whole story has been circling toward, is that the animal was never really the problem to be solved. It was the mirror in which we might, if we are willing, finally see ourselves, our reach, our carelessness, our talent for setting loose forces we cannot recall. The boar is not waiting for our answer. It has already made its own. And somewhere out there tonight, in a forest or a field or the silent streets of an abandoned town, it is moving through the dark, more of it than yesterday, less afraid than ever, and entirely remarkably unstoppable. The forest met the wild boar, and the wild boar in the end inherited it.